I'd like to welcome you to our workshop. The time is 12 noon. And we are in the Joanne Idolette Junior TEC. I ask that out of respect to everyone, please silence all electronic devices. Also, if you have any material you wish to share with a board member, please do that right now by giving it to our executive assistant, Ms. Moret. We will take a break every 2 hours if needed. I'd like to recognize the superintendent to explain the purpose of the workshop and to give us an update on Hurricane Milton.
All right, why don't we start with the hurricane? Just prior to walking down here for this workshop, I did email all of our staff and let them know that we will be closing schools Tuesday through Thursday. We are going to be activating shelters, and as a reminder to the board, it is our employees who operate these shelters. We are the ones who are running these shelters for our community. We will be initially opening Phase 1 shelters tomorrow at 2 p.m., and of those, one special needs shelter. So there's a significant amount of work that needs to happen over the course of the next 20 hours to make sure that we are ready, well, 26 hours, to make sure that we are ready to shut down all of our facilities and then open up the shelters. The plan as it stands right now is that we will remain closed until Thursday morning. Pending the weather, our principals will clear campuses and we'll go through our after-action review. And the goal is by Thursday at noon, notify the community regarding reopening on Friday. So some additional information about the storm, and then Mr. Teskey can bleed right into his presentation regarding safety and security. As a reminder, number of cabinet members will be in and out based on the work that they have to do to close schools. Mr. Seymour is currently at a meeting regarding shelters at EOC, and immediately following Mr. Teskey's presentation, he will head over because ultimately he's the one who runs that work.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Moore. I'm sorry.
Ms. Rosario?
Dr. Moore, can you just reiterate also, I know you mentioned the special needs shelter, can you reiterate the pet shelter? Is that still Treasure Coast Elementary School?
So yeah, that's the meeting they're going to be at. Typically, it has been at Treasure Coast. Liberty, I'm sorry.
Liberty.
Last year, it was at
800 wing.
It was at the 800 ring at the Flick. So one of the things that we need to determine is the volume of shelters that we need to open. They may close bridges. If they close bridges, we're going to have to work triple time over the night to make sure that we're ready, because that's going to be an anticipated increase. The West Coast is fleeing from there right now. We're not designated as a shelter to open to other communities, but we do not turn anybody away. So as the information becomes available, we can anticipate larger than normal residents, as Mr. Teskey calls them, at our shelters.
So I only mention that because I saw something online that was pretty interesting. For the Love of Paws is a nonprofit in Fellsmere, and they have posted on their Facebook page that they have pet crates available for loan, for anyone to borrow if they have a need for a shelter and they need a crate, because I know crates are an issue sometimes in shelters, and I think that's very important for us to be able to share with the community.
Absolutely.
Perhaps we could partner with them to work on that and get the crates over to the shelter.
We-
Okay.
Good. Would you like me to roll into my safety and security zone? Yes, sir. So just to update on Hurricane Milton, I will be attending meetings daily at the EOC, 11:15 and 5:15 evening. They are on full level 1 activation, which Mrs. Idolette and I both serve as the ESF1. We'll both be there for the next few days. We'll be coordinating transportation and logistics to the shelters for the entire county. I will be managing shelter occupancy. We will be overseeing the feeding and the housing of any residents who do choose to attend a shelter, whether they're registered or not. As Dr. Moore mentioned, we do not turn them away. The only shelter that does require pre-registration is the special needs shelter at Treasure Coast Elementary, but our pet-friendly shelter at the 800 wing at the FLC, our numbers have been down for the past few years, so we did move it to from Liberty Magnet to the FLC. But if registrations increase today and tomorrow, there's always the possibility that we would need more space. for the pet-friendly shelter. So I will contact animal control, see what the status is of crates and cages. That's normally who is housed there with me. That's the office that I hold. If I'm not at the EOC, I will be working at the pet-friendly shelter. It's more centrally located for the district for me logistically. Each Wave 1 shelter, we have 6, will be conducting a tabletop drill with me today and tomorrow to run through the actual map location of where occupants and residents will be. Law enforcement will be there with us. Safety and security at the sheltering is a top priority. We do not let our guard down at any moment, so we do separate and segregate appropriately while we are in the shelters. This morning, we had an excellent directors meeting at the SSC building with all the operations and logistics directors. We have an excellent plan in place. Luckily, we have trained our principals and assistant principals. Over the summer, we do that annually. Many of them have completed FEMA registration courses and FEMA online courses for the just-in-time training that the Red Cross does sponsor. None of our shelters are being run by the Red Cross, but their presence could happen there. They could pop in as they normally do to check on us, but we run the shelters. The school district runs them for the entire county. So if there's no other further questions about hurricane preparation and sheltering, I'll move into my safety and security update.
Anyone? Okay. Okay.
So I'm going to just be reading from my laptop here, so pardon me if I don't make eye contact with you, but supporting Rule 6A 1006.07, district school board duties relating to student discipline and school safety. The district school board shall provide for the proper accounting for students, for their attendance, control of students, and the proper attention given to the health, safety matters relating to the welfare of students. In conjunction with the district school superintendent, the school safety specialist, myself, shall annually review the policies and procedures for compliance with the laws, which we have. The school safety specialist and the Office of Safe Schools inspectors will conduct annual unannounced inspections of all public and charter schools. This is while school is in session, and investigate reports of noncompliance with the school safety requirements. After these inspections and tours, the school safety specialist will report violations by administrative personnel or instructional personnel to the district school superintendent or the charter school administrator. At least quarterly, the school safety specialist must report to the district school superintendent and the school board any noncompliance by the school district with laws or rules regarding school safety. The Office of Safe Schools will be providing quarterly reports to each district school superintendent and the school safety specialist, identifying the number and percentage of schools that received unannounced inspections or were re-inspected, and the number and percentage of inspected schools that had no safety requirement deficiencies. All of our 28 public and charter schools have received a type of inspection, unannounced, pop-in, or a formal compliance check to this date, all 28. All of our schools have received at least one deficiency noted. Now, I just want to preface that a deficiency is not a bad thing. Rule 6A being put into place is holding everyone more accountable. So a deficiency will be something that is not life-threatening. It could be, but for us, I'm happy to say that none of our deficiencies were life-threatening that needed to be reported immediately to law enforcement. The deficiencies that have been annotated and recorded on our schools have been mainly clerical. This process is new for our principals and assistant principals and the safety team. Mainly paperwork issues, paperwork documentation, submission errors of forms, and mislabeling of items in the proper category or the proper reporting timeline or place. Lack of certificates, possibly for a threat assessment team meeting, a certification, assessor certification. Those types of certificates were out of compliance. The frequency of drills, some of the drill spacing at some of our schools was not to the liking of the inspectors. Our inspectors want the drills to continue through May, so there was some confusion on calendar days and school days based upon the drills. Although all the drills were conducted, the spacing was questioned at some of the schools. On very few and limited occasions, we have found some open classroom doors. Some of them were as a result of a maintenance issue, some were human error, and others we're finding are decorations on doors, which is impeding the door locking handle mechanisms to go into place. These have been corrected immediately before we leave the school. They are corrected on the spot. We ensure that those work orders are put in. We had an excellent meeting this past Thursday with our principals here for 4 hours, retraining them on threat assessment guidelines, assessor guidelines, creating a Office of Safe Schools compliance binder that they can have readily available for their team or themselves to give to the auditors and the inspectors as soon as they walk in. We reviewed Rule 6A with our administrators. Unfortunately, we had the assistant principal scheduled for this Thursday. We will have to reschedule that now, but we have an excellent action plan in place to ensure that these deficiencies disappear, that these clerical errors are not repeated again, and that the right paperwork documentation is on hand when the auditors and inspectors show up. If you do not have the paper copy in front of you, they will cite you for that as not being on hand. Those were the most of our deficiencies were related to not having those documents on hand. Mr. Seymour and Mrs. Crisafulli and I will continue to work with the schools closely, visiting them and creating action plans that the superintendent is overseeing to approve of the steps that need to be taken into place to remedy the deficiencies, and the random unannounced checks will still continue all year long into summer school. Dr. Moore, that concludes my
I just want
report.
to, I had the opportunity earlier in the year to do a site visit with visits with Mr. Teskey over the course of, as well as Mr. Seymour. And the level of explicit investigation that takes place in order to ensure that our schools are extremely safe is absolutely amazing. So in terms of the work that we do, it is a beyond approach. It is detailed. Mr. Teskey does an absolutely outstanding job, along with the principals, in making sure our campuses are safe and secure. And we should feel comfortable that that is in fact the case. Safety and security is a priority for us. That is the presentation.
Board members?
All right. Oh.
I have one question. The drills, you said it was something about the dates or the calendar dates?
Calendar days and school days, there was confusion with some of the schools as to when you space them 30 to 45 days out. So some of the schools were using calendar days, which caused them to move more to the left. Some of the schools were using the correct school days, which means it pushes it farther to the right. So we have gotten clarity from the Office of Safe Schools. The action plan has already been solved. We have programmed and scheduled all of their drills through May for every school and approved them, so that has been fixed.
Okay, thank you.
The next item, thank you, Mr. Teskey. Go off and save Indian River County.
Sir.
Is the update or the finalization of the last year of our 2025 district strategic plan. Dr. Jacobs will present this information. She's had the opportunity to initially brief it in our previous workshop and then meet with board members to get feedback. And this is one more opportunity to receive feedback, and we'll bring it for approval in our next actual business meeting.
All right, good afternoon through the chair. As Dr. Moore has shared, I will be reviewing over the revisions to the 24-25 district strategic plan. The majority of these revisions that you'll see are related to us attaining our Target 2025 goals earlier than anticipated, so you will see some increases in targets. Additionally, during the current year, we have a strategic focus on innovation and leadership, and we have aligned that to the education fund that was recently established, and so you'll see strategies have been embedded within the plan related to innovation and leadership. And with that, I will start in our focus area 1, which is academic success. In that area, you will see our targets all the way from English language arts, mathematics, science, that we would like to increase those as we go into the 2024-20, or as we end up the 2024-2025 school year. Additionally, our middle school acceleration ranking has been quite a significant improvement over the term of the district strategic plan, and we'd like to continue to maintain a ranking of greater than or equal to a rank of 10 in the state of Florida. At the bottom of the academic success area, you will see there's a strategy that has been revised to be more specific to innovation, fully knowing that career and technical education is one of our areas of innovation, but we'd like to expand that through our pre-K through 12 school sites. And so both the STEAM park at Dodgertown Elementary, as well as our classical school, is an area of innovation right now that we're focusing on, and so you will see that reflected in the area of academic success. With regard to the African American Achievement Plan and academic success, you will see that we've moved from state rankings to the percentage point increase for African American students in English language arts and mathematics. What we have determined is, because we now have stabilized the type of assessments that students are taking, i.e. the FAST, and we are not in a baseline year anymore, those rankings were much more meaningful during previous years to be able to compare across different types of assessments, but now we really want to look at year-over-year progress in those areas. Finally, you'll just see, again, some adjustments to the targets in the area of academic success for the African American Achievement Plan. And then we move on to focus area 2, which is safety, culture, and climate. Target 2.2 has been slightly adjusted. In the previous year, we looked at what percentage of students had 3 or more office discipline referrals. We've become very strategic in the initiatives that we use for student discipline. So last year, with the board support, new cell phone expectations were implemented across our school spaces. And so really we want to take a closer look at the impact of that particular initiative. Last year we saw very high levels of office discipline referrals for cell phones. That is expected whenever you're trying to change behavior, that you'll have that extinction burst, so the behavior will get worse before it gets better. And so this year we're hoping that we see the percentage of students with 3 or more ODRs for cell phones go down significantly as they've acclimated to the new expectations associated with cell phones. The next one is our ranking for the least restrictive environment. In the least restrictive environment, we've learned over the course of the district strategic plan's implementation that being top 10 is not necessarily the most desirable place to be. The desirable place to be is where we're providing students with disabilities opportunities to access the general education setting as much as possible, while also supporting their needs if they're needing a more restrictive setting to be successful in school. You'll see some minor changes. Professional development has been changed to professional learning in alignment with the state, so you'll see that throughout the plan. With regard to the African American Achievement Plan in the area of safety, culture, and climate, there were just some minor adjustments in the targets there. So every year we relook at our targets and our progress and make changes associated with that. You will also see that the term disparities has been replaced with gaps. Then in the area of communication and engagement, you will see no changes to targets or strategies. That's really been a strong area for us, and we continue to maintain high levels of expectation for communication and engagement across the district. Again, in the area of communication and engagement for African American Achievement Plan, there's just a adjusted target there of 9 percentage points. Focus area 4, talent development and support, an adjustment to the target again, and that target was increased upward of district initiated staff recognitions and celebrations per quarter. That was a strategy that we really implemented with Fidelity last year as a retention strategy for the staff members that we have here on our district team and our school teams. Next, you'll see a strategy that in the area of talent development and support of fully embedding continuous improvement cycle planning, action steps, and progress monitoring into aligned professional learning for school leaders. This strategy has been incorporated as this year we've really done a great deal of work on strategically developing our leadership framework and professional learning so that principal, assistant principal, and instructional coach professional learning sessions are all aligned. And within those learning sessions, we have very intentionally planned so that the cadence of accountability for different actions associated with continuous improvement are embedded within those professional learning sessions, and that there's time taken to engage in that work with their colleagues. Page 16, talent development and support for the African American Achievement Plan. Again, just adjusted some targets on African American teachers, the retention rate, as well as instructional staff vacancies. Organizational and fiscal responsibility is our last focus area, and we continue to work on increasing the percentage of schools with no internal audit findings. You'll see that the overall grant funding, we are hoping to maintain or exceed a level of 5.5 million. Those are our supplemental grants. As you have heard Dr. Moore talk over the last few months, customer service is a great area of focus, both at the district level and the school level. We have incorporated goals in both our district strategic plan, our department plans, or what we call them our wildly important goals, and our school improvement plans to focus on customer service. So a strategy has been incorporated related to that. And then finally, strategy 5.4 has language, just refined language in there to show that when we're looking for grant opportunities, we're trying to be even more strategic than we were before. And those grant opportunities that we are pursuing as a priority are related to innovation and leadership within the district. Finally, with regard to the African American Achievement Plan, again, just an adjusted target, an increased target related to students enrolled in school choice. So those are the major updates. You'll see on page 20, for our targets 2025, if you see a little green plus sign or addition sign, that shows that our original target that we had set at the outset of our district strategic plan has already been exceeded. So we have again increased that target based upon the previous success. And that's all I have.
Board members? Anybody like to comment? Dr. Posca?
I'm not going to be extremely verbose today because I know there's a lot of work to be done, but I appreciate the update on the plan. I know we've discussed it in private, but I appreciate that.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll just say I'm happy to see all the good work and the successes. It's always impressive to achieve 5-year goals a year earlier and to stretch them. I think it's the right attitude, and that's important, and we appreciate that.
Ms. Rosario?
So thank you for this update moving forward for this year. I have some questions regarding the targets. Let's see if I can get to them. Okay, I'm on page 20, and I'm looking at talent development and support. The retention of effective and highly effective instructional staff members, this is percentage. The outcome for this year was, this past year, 2024, was 96%. And the target is greater or equal to 95%. Why 1% less? Why not greater or equal to 96?
So I think when looking at teacher retention, you really have some very natural attrition that's always going to be present. So a spouse moves out of state and that teacher follows their spouse out of state. A teacher may move to another district in order to pursue another opportunity or just simply pursue a different profession. And so I don't know that we can reasonably anticipate maintaining a higher level than 96% because we can generally expect that we will have some attrition each year on an annual basis. I just think it might be disingenuous for us to place it up even higher.
Yeah, I understand that. What was the target going into 2024 for 2024?
That would be greater than or equal to 95%.
Right there.
So you kept the same 95%
Correct,
across?
because it's not indicated as being increased. that is the same target.
All right. And then the next question that I have is certified instructors, African American percentage and Hispanic percentage. For African American, this past year, the outcome was 11%. And this coming year is 19%. That's a pretty high expectation. And even greater for Hispanic, which Hispanic only went up 1% in the previous year. Going to 25% is like, you know, a stretch out of, I don't know if you're gonna kind of handpick people out from wherever they are, but can we have a detailed understanding of how we're going to reach 19 and 25?
So those two particular targets have been set since the outset of the Chief 2025 strategic plan to align with the student population in the district. That is aligned with the African American Achievement Plan and the Joint Plan, so that's how those original targets were derived. I do think for our upcoming new cycle of the 5-year strategic plan, that certainly we can have conversation about that. I know that our student population percentage-wise isn't necessarily reflective of our adult population of African American or Hispanic individuals within our community. It's actually lower, the percentage of adults. So to expect that we would have a higher percentage that's consistent with student population, I think might be a little difficult to attain. So certainly we could have that conversation, but it was just to maintain our alignment with the African American Achievement Plan, the work that's being done in that area.
So maybe we should re-look at what we have in the African American Achievement Plan, because it's not realistic.
We
It
have
hasn't
to-
been realistic in the last 4 years, and it's certainly expected to be unrealistic for this coming year. I mean,
I would certainly
It would be
want to
great,
talk to
but
Dr. Shafty about the
it
implications
might
with
be
our work.
an easy fix if we can just take a look at that, or adjust it here first today, you know, moving forward so that we can approve it with something that is achievable, something that is reachable and achievable for the district, and then we can revisit the African American Achievement Plan, you know, in somewhere in between. I see Dr. Moore is like, his wheels are turning.
No, it's, you are correct. It is a very lofty goal. I think the theory of action was to remain consistent with all of the targets, and we may have been accused of being disingenuous of reducing the expectation for these specific areas when we had a
I know.
structure in place for all of them.
I don't know.
I agree with you that it is an extremely lofty goal, but it is consistent with what we had previously done. When we record or report back to the community, to the board or through the board, our goal would be to establish a 2% increase, which would be progress. But at the end of the day, we have been extremely intentional at looking at hiring the absolute best teachers, and I think that is probably the biggest piece to the recipe in terms of the success that we have demonstrated. The other thing that Dr. Jacobs has mentioned in looking at the overall reflection of our community is probably more realistic than our student population. And that would be a conversation, I think, as we will start engaging in as we create the 26-30 strategic plan.
Yeah, but I still think that we should, I mean, this is your evaluation at the end of the year. This is going to be an area that we evaluate you in terms of, you know, did you reach this goal? I think I would be comfortable if you come back with some other amount that seems attainable. And then if we need to revisit the African American Achievement Plan, I'm certainly willing to do that too. I mean, it's not unrealistic. I'd rather it look more like something we can do, even though it would be wonderful if we could reach these numbers. I just don't see it likely.
Yeah. No, we could look at it.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the other one is the end balance. I'm in organizational and fiscal responsibility. Total end fund balance, the outcome was 14%. It says tentative, but we should know what the outcome is as of now because we passed our budget. So that shouldn't have tentative. Is it still 14?
It's actually 17.
17, so we need to fix that before it comes back to us. And then the target, why are we targeting for 11% if our current fund balance is set 17? I think it should be greater than or equal to 17.
Same theory of action, but we'll do the same process as we're doing with certified teachers.
What? You'll do this, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's greater than or equal to 17 now seems to be realistic. Unless board members want a different amount, I mean, they just have to throw out another percentage, but I certainly don't expect that we're gonna approve a strategic plan that shows that we are goaling to have less in our fund balance. We should have at least the same, if not more, as a goal.
I think there is, so when we look at fund balances, and I know we've had this conversation before, there's a fine line between utilizing your money effectively to ensure students are accessing the resources and then just saving for the purposes of having a high fund balance. So I think each year, the fund balance is really driven by the student needs or the initiatives and projects that are going on. And so the reason why it was plus or minus 2 was because then if we were up at 13, then, you know, we still have wiggle room. We can always do better, but we want to make sure that we're staying at least at a minimum between plus or minus 11%.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but our previous year, we went from, our previous years, we went from 11 to 12 to now 17. That's an incredible increase, which is great, but you're right. And so I think in this particular area, you know, even if we were to say wherever we are now, greater than or equal to plus or minus 2%, greater than or equal to 17 plus or minus 2 or 3 or 4, whatever you want to say, that just seems a little bit more, again, realistic. But I think we all understand the fluidity of our fund balance. And certainly where there's a need, we need to spend it. Okay, and the last thing that I have, and I understand consistency, I get that. One of the things with the targets that has been a conversation with Dr. Moore and I on several occasions is that some areas we might accomplish well, and then we'll take it off the table. It's no longer going to be a target because we've already met those several years in a row. We just know it's an easy 100. It's kind of like, you know, you're teaching in a classroom, you know your target is always going to be, I don't know, to increase, you know, literacy by 5%. And every year, the teacher reaches literacy by 5%. And next year is the same thing, and next year. So at some point, you want to extend that to maybe 6 or 7%, so that we are challenging our teachers, something to that effect. But here, it seems there are several areas that are 100% every year, and I'm wondering if it's even worth it. It looks nice, but I'm not even sure anymore. I mean, I know this is the last year. I'm going to throw it out there, and it's probably not going to grab hold at this point, but compliance with materials audit and financial audit. We have 100% for the last 4 years. And I'm sure this year is going to be 100% again. I'm just not sure if it's even worth it. And if we're going to keep it in there this year, moving into next, you know, the next cycle of strategic plan, I'm not even sure if it's worth it. Dr. Moore.
Through the chair, I would say they are worth it because the volume of work that goes into maintaining those 100 is extreme. And it becomes a point or a leverage for us from an accountability standpoint to make sure literally the hundreds of people who are
Working it.
controlling the material audits as well as, it's not 100 people with the fiscal, but in theory it is. It just helps us make it a priority for everyone. So it's really the only couple that are in that specific category. The class size is another one. With the strategies that we have put in place to maintain class size, that is a major driving force for us because the easiest way to save money is to have less teachers, but then that increases class size. So
Yeah.
it forces us not to take the easy way out, to maintain class size and look for efficiencies in other places throughout the system.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for talking that through. One area that I thought about moving in is an area that we often, moving to the next strategic plan, and it came to my attention just now as you were talking, is the out of certification area. That could be something that we can add to the next target, so that that's, what, did I say something?
As we just approved the October, I think we have some bold predictions on the reduction that we're going to see in February. So although we were happy to report we had 15, 20 less off the top of my head that we approved in October, we think with the structures that we've put in place for the ESOL certifications or courses that you can take, we want to see significant reduction coming in October or February, and that will give us, if we don't see that, then I would agree, yes, we need to put it on the strategic plan, because it's, although we are proud that it's gone down, it needs to go down even further by simply making resources available to teachers so they can become certified as easily possible within the time that they have available to them, without requiring them to be away from their families to get the certification done.
Yeah, I don't think I was thinking about it for this year, but moving into the next cycle of, the next 4 years of our future strategic plan, I think that would be a good target to add on there, because that is something that we're working on every year to reduce, for sure. I have a question can you just clarify the next African American Achievement Plan targets? The African American white gap in students with 1 or more out-of-school suspension. This year, there were 11%. It was 11%, and our target is 0%. Is that correct?
That is correct. So again, that was aligned with the work originally when we first established this with the joint plan to eliminate the gap,
To eliminate or to decrease
to eliminate.
in 1 year?
No,
You're
this
gonna-
was originally set in 2020. So the 2025 target that was set in 2020 was to eliminate the gap.
But we haven't eliminated it.
Correct. We don't, I think right now, we're not wanting to walk back kind of where we've set
I don't
for-
recall, sorry, go ahead, sorry.
for 2025.
Yeah, I don't recall 0 being on any of the other targets in previous years. I might be wrong, but I don't recall that.
For target 2025, yes. Not for target 2021, 22, 23, or 24.
What was the target for 22, 23, and 24?
I would have to refer back to all those
There was a number there.
versions.
There was a number there.
But 2025 was
It
still
was the
0.
end of. Well, don't think you're going to reach that. I don't know. We haven't gotten 0 in multiple years. I mean, now you're at 9% and then 11%, and then you're going to try to reach for 20. That's just another one of those areas that I think you should think about before bringing it back to us. Even though it's on the 2025 goal from 5 years ago, doesn't necessarily mean that we've made progress in that area enough for you to clearly say that's where we're going to be at the end of this year. And the same thing with the next line, African American white gap in classroom removals. This year, we had 2.65, and then this year target is 1%, is that correct?
So, yes, and that's
Same.
the same rationale.
All right, Dr. Moore.
I know, lofty goals.
Okay.
All right, but we will look.
The next one here, number of students participating in African American Student Council. In 2023, we had 112. In 2024, we only had 52. That's surprising. And then, of course, our goal now is 125 for this coming year. What happened in 2024?
I think part of that is just an input that are we capturing every single student that is participating in those council meetings all the time? So I think when we first initiate the African American Achievement Councils, people were very good with the fidelity of getting that data in there, but we're seeing a little bit of implementation drift with that. And we're continuing, and it's not something like we've thrown our hands up with.
Do you mean like attendance sheets,
Yes,
basically?
yes. And so we've been addressing that with the schools.
But do you need an attendance sheet to prove those numbers?
We need people to submit the data.
Submit the data. Got it.
Through the chair, if I may comment on that.
Got it. That makes sense.
We transitioned from paper reporting to focused reporting in that year. So some of that was a learning curve of making sure that that particular extracurricular was aligned to and with the student and the sponsor in focus, so it generated the dashboard. Something else to consider is the count of students participating isn't as important as the impact. So the work that these councils are doing is still quite impactful, and the count may not reflect that as being a decrease.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense, but here we're just looking at numbers, so we're not looking at impact. Although I think I would rather look at impact than number, personally. Publicly available dynamic data dashboards, disaggregate, oh no, that's not one, sorry. Retention of new and African-American instructional staff. We want 90% retention, is that correct?
That is correct, and that was adjusted from, our outcome 2023 was 96. This year was 82, so 90% was set for 2025.
So 80% retention means that we had less teachers, less African-American instructional staff members retained in 2024.
Just the brand new, so this is only the new hires.
Oh, this-
Because they go through a mentorship process, so
New.
that.
Retention of new.
Those
Okay, I see it.
percentages can swing a little bit more than the other percentages, because this is a subset of our teachers, and is a subset of our teachers.
Got it, okay. I see the new there. All right, that makes sense. And I think that is it, so thank you very much. I appreciate the information and the presentation.
Okay, Dr. Jones?
Just a couple things. Dr. Moore, when we look into our new strategic plan, obviously I wasn't here when this was developed, but I really like the guiding principles and the focus areas. Do you think that will be still your focus as we move forward?
Through the chair, I think overarching, yes, but it will be a very authentic conversation with my staff and the board regarding our focus areas moving into the next 5 years.
Okay. I like what you said earlier. One of the focus areas, and I've talked to Mr. Green about this, customer service. You know, people may not always like what we say on a phone call, but returning calls and, you know, making sure that we are responding, I think, is key. As far as the lofty goals, and they are lofty goals when we're looking at African-American and Hispanic teachers and not only recruiting them, but retaining them. And I know at one time we talked about strategies to retain. So I like those lofty goals. You're always looking to make that lofty goal instead of decreasing your expectation. As far as the African American Student Council, I've attended at Vero Beach High School, and the one at Sebastian I was supposed to go to last week had been canceled, but Mr. Adams is rescheduling. Their impact on the last 2 years that I've been there has been wonderful. Mr. O'Keefe came in as a Vero Beach High School principal. I know Mr. Cummings has come in as the Sebastian River High School principal. So again, how this was written and why it was written, whoever did that, that was a great impact as far as feeling part of the school, feeling part of the team, and the people who lead that are wonderful. Are they active, Dr. Shafty or Dr. Jacobs, at the middle schools now? Okay, I haven't been there yet, so I will get there. Thank you for all the work. I know that we're excited about all the goals we have achieved. And even though they may be 100%, The minute, if you take it off, then people are thinking, oh, I maybe don't have to work so hard, even though it is very, very important. So, and you need to brag when that happens. So thank you very much.
All right, couple things. I know we're not here to approve it today, but we're here to give suggestions and comments and feedback, and I appreciate you listening to board members and taking our feedback. A couple things. Cell phone policy. You know, that's one that I brought in and I was really excited about. And now that I'm in a lot of state meetings, I'm hearing that actually Dixie County gave us a big kudos on our cell phone policy and want to know some data because they are trying to push that through this year and felt like ours was a really good one to mirror. So I just thought I'd throw that out. They liked it. What are we doing about our cell phone habitual offenders? So what are our percentages? What are our numbers? You said they're going down, but you know, how many stragglers do we have out there that have a habitual problem?
So the way this was written, the target was written, we do look at habitual offenders. So last year, 5% of our students had 3 or more ODRs for cell phone, which essentially means in behavioral science, we look for 3 data points pointing in the same direction to say we have a pattern. And so that was 5% of our students. We are hoping this year, and because we're only in the first quarter, it's really hard to tell, but we're hoping this year to decrease that by at least 1 percentage point. And we've already implemented other procedures with dress code and IDs, so we're also keeping an eye on that as well. But it was 5% as of last year. I can tell you that cell phones was the highest number of ODRs district-wide was for cell phones last year.
So perhaps we could put out some more communication for parents to really pay attention to. One thing I've heard from parents is, well, I need to contact my child in case of emergency. I said, so that if an active shooter is walking down the hall, they can hear your child's voice? You know, I think people really don't think about the whole picture when we're talking about safety and cell phones. That's one comment. Another one is there are a lot of statistics out there about the psychological implementations of the habitual use of cell phones, especially for children and their growing brains. And I think that given that fact in front of a parent is impactful. They look at that and say, oh, I didn't really realize this cell phone and the addictive use of the cell phone. They've got to constantly check their cell phone. Like I've said in the past, you know, at my hairdresser, watching this 15-year-old working and literally couldn't not touch her phone every 5 minutes. Had to pick it up and look to see if she had a text message or something. It's a real addiction. So that's one thing I'm going to keep harping on. 100% of audits, I think, is really important to keep in there, especially since I think it's just Ms. Rosario and myself that when we were first on the board, we had some issues with audits at the school level. So thank you for keeping that in there. Corrected health and safety violations, 90%. Could it be higher? We're talking safety.
We've made some significant progress there. So in talking with Mr. Michael and Mr. Copeman about this target, I had some of the same questions as you. Part of the correction of initial health and safety violations is also being able to access the equipment that is needed. And sometimes with the supply chain delays that we had, some of those things went unfixed because we simply didn't have the means to fix them. So I'm certainly open to seeing if we can increase those. I don't know with the hurricane coming if we're going to experience more of the supply chain delays, but that is part of it. The other thing is sometimes these are things like cameras are broken or exit signs are broken, and they go back and a student has broken it again, so they can't count it as being corrected because it was corrected, but when they go out on reinspection, it's broken again.
So if it's camera, we can see which child did it.
Well, yes, the camera, more of like the signage, I think, is, you know, exit signs and that sort of thing.
Okay. And then I agree with Ms. Rosario about adding the target about a field, because that is a thing that we talk about every year. And it would be nice to see that number going down and prove it. So I think add it. The African-American white gap percentage number, is that aligned to the DSEG order or the joint plan somehow? Is that why it got put in there the way it did?
Which gap are you referring to?
The one that said, I think Ms. Rosario brought it up about the 0%.
The 0%, so the out-of-school suspension. So both of those, so both the out-of-school suspension gap as well as the classroom removal risk ratio.
Yes.
That really grew out of the work that we were doing with the joint plan and African American Achievement Plan to eliminate the gaps.
That's what I thought. Okay. And then I'd like to see a comparison of the new African-American retention compared to all new hires. Is it out of proportion, or is it within the same? You already know that number?
I do not know that
Oh.
number. That's a good question, though.
Yeah, it's a great question,
Yeah.
isn't it? Because I think,
I
you know,
think we
you
can
can say, well, our African-American new hires are not, what was the retention number, is 80-something?
82.
82%, but what's the new hire percentage? Let's compare the same thing. And then, I think that's all I had. Thank you for all this work. I appreciate the fact that you're giving all of us the opportunity to give input on this, because it is our joint plan. And, you know, I think when we first came up with it, it was a lot of work, so it's nice to tweak and fine-tune it for moving forward. And, you know, we always have to consider, this isn't our future, it's our kids' future. And so we can't keep doing things the way we used to do them. We have to look at how they need them for their future. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, so our next item
I have a
is,
follow-up.
oh, I'm sorry.
So I have a follow-up with the cell phones. So I did real estimate here, 5% of our students who had ODRs for cell phones, if we had, you know, based on 15,000 students, that's 750 students who had ODRs for cell phones.
So this is 3 or more ODRs, the number of
Three
or
or
percentage.
more ODRs.
For cell phones.
Okay, and you said that was about 5% of our student population.
Correct.
So that's 750 students who had 3 or more ODRs. How many students had just one ODR?
We can look at that. I know that we had a total of 5,392 ODRs for cell phones. And so within that includes the repeated cell phone offenses.
So there was an issue last year, and this conversation came up just this year as well in one of our meetings. I can't even remember which one. It might have been one of our one-on-ones where I'm going to go back. The ODR last year, somehow someone told, and I don't know when or who, told me that the system doesn't separate behavior by cell phone. You only see it or saw it if it was entered in as insubordinate behavior or, you know, disrespectful behavior or something else, non-compliance, you know, whatever that behavior was. And then in the notes section, the teacher would write, student had cell phone or refused to use cell phone, you know, whatever the issue is. And you would have to go, it might have been you would have to go in and then in again to kind of read all of those notes and find out which ones were cell phones, which made it very hard. And even when you even when you pull up Power BI, I'm right? Okay.
There's a time
timeline.
context.
Okay, good. So you can clarify that. So even when you pull up Power BI, we could see the ODRs, but we don't see the ODRs based on issue. You only see ODR. I mean, that could be a myriad of things. You know, the office discipline referral system could be they were tardy, or they threw gum, or, you know, they weren't listening in class, or they had a cell phone, or they caught. I mean, there could be so many different things. So I think that's really where the question was that I kept having was we need, or maybe the statement was, we need a system, especially since we have changed our student code of conduct, we needed to add cell phones as a separate item in the ODR system, right? And I have a feeling you're gonna say we did, and that's how you got it. So when did that happen? And if it did happen, when did that happen? And if that happened mid-year, how are we sure that we're looking at the right data?
Okay. So our current system in Power BI does disaggregate office discipline referrals by discipline code, meaning that we can look whether it was cell phone, tardy, fighting, and the type of fighting, whether it's major or minor fighting. So we do have that capability. With regard to the reference to not being able to see cell phones, prior to last school year, cell phones was not specifically outlined in the Code of Conduct as a disciplinary infraction. As a result, we did not have a specific disciplinary code in our discipline system decoded as cell phones. So if there was a major issue with a cell phone, meaning a kid was blatantly standing in class and disrupting the whole class with a cell phone, it would be coded as something like disruption in the 22-23 school year and before, and you would have to actually look in the narrative to see if it was, the disruption was related to cell phones. However, since last year, because the Code of Conduct was changed, concurrent with that change in Code of Conduct beginning in August, cell phones was a designated office discipline referral code. So we do have accurate data for last year. It's the previous years because it was not considered an infraction in previous years unless some other behavioral infraction was committed with the cell phone.
Okay. Good. So that, just to clarify, that happened for August 2024. I'm sorry, August 2023. So that covered 23 and 24 school year.
Correct.
Okay, good. And that's good. And in Power BI does not show, I mean, it only shows students with one or more ODRs. I mean, that's everybody. It doesn't show another category of students with 3 or more, right? It doesn't actually show.
You can see it, we can't.
Yes, we can, so in Power BI, our discipline dashboards
Yes.
are quite complex. So we can split it by all those different ways that we want to see it.
Yeah, so I'm heading to my point, which is, although you all can see it, we're not being that transparent with our community this way. If cell phones are a concern and we want parents to be, we want to communicate that to parents, I think we should be able to add, if you look on Power BI, there are like these drop-down options, right? Of course, you've been there. But for those who haven't seen it, you can enter in a month, or you can enter in a school type. You can drop down the grade, race. I'm wondering if we can have a drop down for the behavior. So if we or anybody else in the community wants to see how many ODRs were for fighting, they can just click that, down, or for cell phones, and have that drop down for that option. I think that would make it, instead of doing a blanket everyone who has an ODR, we can actually provide that information.
So one of the
specifically.
considerations that we have to make when we make data public facing and available to the wider public is also being cognizant of student confidentiality. And so when we start getting down to the number of students that have 3 or more ODRs in a school like Pelican Island, for example, we might have only 2 or 3 students there that have 3 or more ODRs. Well, that is more easy to identify who that student might be that has the ODRs, and then you would know what kind of ODRs it is. And so even if a teacher is in the school, if they're not that student's teacher, then they have no need to know that information. And so if they looked on a publicly available dashboard and said 3 or more, these are the infractions that student has, then that could be compromising the student's confidentiality. The other aspect of it is what are we creating, for what purpose are we creating different dashboards? The dashboards that we make available to staff are really for the purposes of problem solving and identifying the interventions that students need. So the level of specificity of the data is much greater than what we give to the public, because it also requires staff resources to create all those dashboards, whether it be public facing, staff facing, and creating the permissions that are available either on the website or for staff. And so every dashboard that you see there is hours and hours of development, and it's hours and hours to actually maintain each and every one of those dashboards and the different levels of data that are there.
Well, I would disagree with you. I don't think it's easy to identify a student. I mean, identifiable information, you can probably, play puzzle with it, or Tetris, but it's not going to identify a student by name or grade or class or anything like that. But at either rate, you mentioned something else that I find pretty interesting. Identifiable information, we have a policy for identifiable information, and this isn't on there. I mean, you could probably say the same thing for any of the discipline ODRs. If you have someone who was chewing gum in class and there was only one student in that entire school, I mean, you could make that argument for anything, and I just think that that's disingenuous if we're not putting out the right information. There's a recent.
Can I respond to that? We use the same standard as the state does for 10 or less. So when at any time the cell value is 10 or less, we use the state will, when they produce their data as well, they use the same standard and expectations. So I just want to be sure that we know that we're being consistent with what state expectations are as well.
There might be a way to actually provide cell phone without the school then, so that the school is blocked out and you're just getting the numbers for the cell phone usage or the ODRs for just cell phone without any of the other information. I'm sure that there's a way to do that. There was a recent research article that I read, which was very interesting on mental health. And what was found in this research article is that oftentimes there are issues at school, at the school level, but there is the gap that occurs is that a student might have, and I'm not comparing cell phones to mental health in this particular area, I'm just saying when there are issues in a particular classroom that a teacher is unaware of, if there is a mental health issue that a teacher is unaware of, but a guidance counselor is, or an administrator is aware of it, or somebody else in the school building is aware, but the teacher is unaware, that actually provides the teacher with less of means to intervene or to provide services in the classroom. And so what was told to teachers in this research was, oh, I can't share that with you because that violates the student privacy information, or I can't share that with you because that violates some other something or other. Whereas, in fact, it was a gross misinterpretation of FERPA, and it would indeed provide support for the student in that classroom if the teacher understood what was actually happening and what interventions happen. So I think we need to kind of take a look at things from a different perspective, whereas is it really identifiable? I mean, I think that's just reaching straws. I really do. I don't think that that's necessary, but I'll just stop it right there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. So the next item is an item we're very proud of. Not that we're not proud of the strategic plan and the depth of which this plan has really driven our work forward. I will say our public-facing dashboards is unique to Indian River County, and every time I have the opportunity to share with other superintendents, they're literally like, I can't believe you share so much information. I don't think you can find another system that is more transparent and public-facing our information and our data. As we transition into this is the Pelican Island K-8 Magnet School, our classical school that we are getting ready to open next school year. Dr. Shafty and team, as well as the school site leadership, has done an absolutely outstanding job of taking this to the community, taking this to the staff. We are very, very excited to take the next step with this initiative, and Dr. Shafty will brief the board.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Through the chair, our district understands and embraces change as exploration of what it will take to make public education accessible to all families and all students. As part of the exploration, we are pursuing an expansion of Pelican Island Elementary into a K-8 school. As you noticed from the timeline, we began this journey October last fall, and we had the authorization from the board members to explore different types of models of schooling, classical education being one, a K-8, a technical school, and the boutique high school. We came back earlier this year on February 12th, and we provided the findings of that exploration through briefings and presentations. And then most recently on June 10th, we provided the findings from the community survey results and associated recommendations. As we move forward in this plan, this will include that same format of a briefing, a detailed briefing attached to this item, as well as this presentation, where we explored and conducted an analysis of boundary areas, mapping out options, and the community meetings that we held for parent input, in which we've made adjustments along the way. Going back to earlier this spring, we have shared that there is a declining student enrollment at critical milestone grade levels, being kindergarten, 6th grade, and 9th grade. So this responsive approach of a K-8 model helps that transition from elementary to middle school. And our research indicates that successful experiences in the middle grades have been linked to tremendous and increased academic achievement for students. And with Pelican Island, we are so excited to introduce the first publicly funded K-8 in Indian River County and provide that model school experience for our families. And as we refer to the survey results from spring, I just want to remind everyone of the respondents with students not currently enrolled in a magnet school. The overwhelming majority were interested in enrolling their student in a magnet school. It fell at 81%. And additionally, 2/3 of respondents were very or extremely interested in a K-8 model. So this is that responsive approach to the community survey. Here's a little bit about the stakeholder outreach. We had a tentative plan when we came before the board in June, but there were some critical milestones that we wanted to capture. So July 8th, we began really conceptualizing what a classical K-8 model would look like in Indian River County, and that is bringing together district and school leadership teams. So early as our administrators, we've seen in business meetings and presentations convene for Engage, which is a professional learning over summer. And this particular leadership team already began embracing that classical approach to this upcoming school year. On August 5th, Dr. Moore and myself had the opportunity to meet with Pelican Island faculty and conduct a listening tour and answer any questions they may have. We began a relationship with our communications team to begin a storyboard production, because visualizing what classical is would be so important to our families. And during the first week of school, we began walking the building space to see what this expansion would look like through capacity. We met one of the most powerful experiences, I will say, on September 19th. Dr. Began and myself attended the open house already scheduled at Pelican Island and hovered in the kindergarten and 1st grade hallways just to be able to answer questions for families. And it was such a powerful learning experience when the community results actually was confirmed by conversations with the parents impacted by this change. Some of the things we heard from families, one particular family has a rising or an upcoming 1st grader and a current 5th grader, and she was disappointed that her 5th grader would lose out on the K-8 experience in our transition year. We heard other families actually verbalize that they were looking for a K-8 space, and they have a pre-K student and a current kindergarten student, and they were going to look elsewhere because that time together, the 9 years together, was really important for that family. And then one of the other perspectives of, seeing the principal and the AP chat with families and say, I get to spend the next 8 years with you. And the families were so responsive to that. So it's a pretty powerful experience to chat with the impacted families, and it was incredibly well received by the families. This is the timeline. It has not shifted with the exception of the 2026-2027 school year. So we are We are in pre-implementation this school year, and we know that our incoming first graders, which are this year's kindergarten students, will be afforded first right of refusal. I will say we had 22 families attend kindergarten open house. An additional 2 families had follow-up conversations after. So just by that, those mere counts, we were over 50% of families at open house who were happy and received this information. Next year, we look forward to a phased-in approach with kindergarten and first grade, embracing the classical programming, and we'll follow that same commitment to not displace any current Pelican Island family. And for the upcoming school year, any open seats will be filled through the choice process, with 2nd and 5th graders being offered first right of refusal. So that pattern happens every year to ensure that if a parent opted into Pelican Island, we will not be displacing them. That is absolutely our commitment. The one change, as I previously shared, is in 26-27, we will have the phased-in approach from K1, 2, 3, and we will add grade 6. It helps bridge the gap for the programming and allowing us to begin that K-8 expansion a lot sooner than possible, listening to our families and what they've requested, that smaller space for K-8. And by K-28-29 academic year, all students in the K-8 will be on choice. So this is, the majority of the timeline has stayed the same, with that exception of the phased-in approach, including grade 6, 2 years out. These are some additional implementation strategies we wanted to capture because they will impact every phase of the timeline. We remain committed to Pelican Island students remaining enrolled to complete their time through 8th grade with transportation provided by the district. We know that we will continue to allow siblings of students to attend, so we are not breaking families apart to have to get one student to this school versus another school. New students moving into the current attendance boundary for Pelican Island will be rezoned and transported to Sebastian Elementary School. And then it's important for our community to know, and we had that conversation with our families, that Pelican Island K-8 Magnet will not be a comprehensive middle school. And by comprehensive, that is not your traditional athletic teams, your gymnasiums, your athletic fields. However, students will be allowed to participate in athletic extracurricular activities at their zoned neighborhood schools. Okay. And we wanted to share, this video was created and shared with families during open house to help paint the landscape of what classical programming is and looks like and would be like for their students. And there were so many conversations after of understanding what this approach is, because it resonated with how the current generation of families raising students were also educated. So I'd love to show you the video.
Walking through the doors of the first publicly funded K-8 magnet school in Indian River County allows students and families to see how traditional public education will be the foundation of Pelican Island K-8 Magnet School. The mission of Pelican Island K-8 Magnet School will be to serve the students who walk the halls of our buildings in partnership with the families in pursuit of the same goal. Students learning through a classical education model will be focused on qualitatively changing the way education is experienced in the school district of Indian River County. Staff at the Pelican Island K-8 Magnet School will impact the future of our students by investing in classical education and helping to develop students into young adults who live virtuous lives and love to learn. Pelican Island K-8 Magnet School is a community of learners that will have the unique opportunity to spend 9 years together. Our students, our teachers, our staff, everyone working together, focusing on educating students to develop a strong foundation of support. You can't help but walk through Pelican Island Elementary and not feel a sense of family. When the virtues are emphasized along with the curriculum, you will see the behavior of the children, whether it is walking in the hallway, or how they treat each other on the playground. We are able, in the classical environment, to bring students together as citizens, pursuing virtuous living, traditional learning, and civic responsibility. Classical education is a traditional, time-tested educational approach that has educated some of the greatest thinkers and innovators of the world. From Leonardo da Vinci to Isaac Newton, from Dante and Shakespeare to Rousseau and Thoreau, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and other founders of the United States of America were all classically educated. Pelican Island K-8 Magnet School will be enrolling kindergarten and first grade students in the 2025-2026 school year. Beginning in the earliest grades, students will be guided through specific exercises such as comparing and contrasting, logical sequencing, drawing inferences, and identifying similarities and differences through repetition, memorization, and rhyme, while growing in the hearts and minds of our students. As students progress through the upper grades, they will be asked to articulate the reasons for the answers and discern likely outcomes of a particular real-life or theoretical situation that he or she gives in class. For example, students may be asked to explain how they arrived at the answer to a math problem, to support their literary opinion by citing specific passages from the reading, or to articulate how their science project adheres to the scientific method. These and numerous other reasoning exercises will be implemented repeatedly throughout the curriculum to instill in the child essential thinking skills that prepare them for all future learning and problem solving.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The foundation of classical education is the pursuit of intellectual and moral virtue, preparing students to go into society and give of themselves for the good of other people, passing on what they have learned to future generations, educating the whole child through the mission and pillars of virtue. Classical education is for all students, training students to be virtuous and knowledgeable scholars, raising a generation of young people pursuing their full potential and civic responsibility. The classrooms at Pelican Island K-8 Magnet School are well organized, purposeful, and free from distractions, creating a respectful atmosphere for learning. Class time will be devoted to the teacher's presentation of material, discussion, student practice, and instructor feedback. Daily homework assignments, which are based on the day's lesson, and a regular schedule of quizzes, tests, and creative projects keep the student engaged and directed toward the repeated application of the tools of learning, as well as the acquisition of knowledge. Teachers will embrace the outcome for a classically educated student to see connections among concepts he or she is learning, how they may be relevant to the student's own life, and cultivate the intrinsic motivation to pursue further knowledge. Pelican Island K-8 Magnet School wants to continue growing as a school, becoming better at the education we provide. Parents will experience educational programming where students, young scholars, are excited about their day and can't wait to share and show what they learned. The classroom environment focuses on virtuous education, a content-rich curriculum, which is a traditional approach to learning. Feelings of joy and nostalgia exude from the learning spaces at Pelican Island K-8 Magnet. Aristotle said, "Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all." Adherence to the time-tested educational principles of classical education in no way limits our commitment to meeting the needs of modern families and preparing children for a challenging and unpredictable future. In fact, The principles of classical education provide students with the tools of learning and instill in them a lifelong desire to increase in knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. We are going to have great leaders and scholars who will continue to enrich our community in tremendous ways for generations to come. Pelican Island K-8 Magnet School, a classical approach.
So I have to thank our communications team. It was a team effort to come together and write a storyboard, but the intent of that storyboard was to create the experience that our families could expect to receive at Pelican Island. So thank you, Ms. Maddox and Mr. Heiser. Here are some student enrollment impacts. We see from 22, 23, 24, looking at first day or first week enrollments, that Pelican Island is on a positive trajectory, but still operating at 50% capacity. We know that we need to be responsive with programming in order to increase student enrollment. So this is the predicted enrollment counts, or the anticipated enrollment counts each year over year by 28-29 being at 100% capacity, which is important through a fiscal lens, but while also being responsive with the programming that we offer to our families. Speaking of fiscal implications, because we are using the existing building, the initial year impacts are quite minimal with landscaping and outdoor beautification, school signage with an overlay. It will be important for us to be responsive and responsible in this first year of programming, because as we transition and expand to a K-8, some of the facility plans, traffic patterns, and things may need to shift as we expand to the K-8. So we want to be responsive to this programming in year one, but that's where you see that expansion to 6-8 will have different financial impacts regarding furniture, potentially moving or looking at where current parent parking and bus loops are, as well as the first of its kind modified job description for a K-8 principal in Indian River County. Here are the next steps that we anticipate forecasting. These next steps are anchored in using thought partners for this work. It's not like with some other programming where we can pick up the phone and connect with another district or another school to see how this is being done, because while we have fantastic thought partners, they are not through the lens of a public school district. So we are excited to have these thought partners along the way through the power of collaboration. Very early on, we shared with you that we went to True North, and they were incredibly just open, being able to bridge theory and practice and walk those classrooms with the current principal really connected a lot of dots for us of we feel very confident that we can do this, and we can do this really well. So having that power of collaboration with our current practitioners, we can't make up for that. There's no amount of articles that we can read that will help show us what this can look like. So not only do we have a partnership with True North, but we have a recent partnership with Jacksonville Classical. So our current principal at Pelican Island has reached out, and both schools have offered and extended invitations, and we just need to see it. We need to see it both ways. We need to walk the campus, and we need to establish relationships. Another connection with an expert is Flagler College has established a classical institute. In the summer of 2022, they received funding from the state, and we are in conversation with the directors, or the institute's director, and they offer Saturday seminars. There's a really great one we're trying to get into in November, which is lesson planning through the Trivium. He has a whole team ready to support us, and leveraging these relationships are going to be very critical for us in year one, and the fact that these relationships are extending two ways so quickly has been powerful for us. And our internal team will continue to do our best and explore and research how we can make this the most authentic programming, so that we are not veering from the tenets of classical education in this K-8 model. Here is a typical classical programming schedule. These are just examples, but these are the instances where leveraging our thought partners are pretty powerful. On the left, we have a typical grade 1 schedule from a current elementary school, starting at 8:45 with English language arts block. And what you will notice in the example classical schedule on the right is a distinction in what specifically happens in the English language arts block to have that phonic space reading. You will see that the morning meeting is anchored in virtues. When we say virtues, some examples of those would be courage, honesty, perseverance. When you look at our state's resiliency standards, they're aligned perfectly. Mathematics should happen through foundational arithmetic. Memory or resuscitation is so important, and it's cross content. So some of the examples we've seen is if students are learning their basic facts, some of the memory work would be repetition of their fact families and addition strategies. Some of the repetition in other instances we've seen have to do with history and geography. But memory or recitation won't live in isolation. It helps connect the learning for each grade level to build upon. Of course, we have teacher-directed PE, and then what you will notice that's different is after this lunch, after the lunch block in this example schedule, you'll have a distinct grammar or spelling time, as well as literature through classical stories, and some of those examples would be Frog Prince, Tale of Peter Rabbit, Sleeping Beauty, and then specials and science and history. So we thought it was important to detail the differences between a typical schedule, which absolutely may work for some of our families, but what a classical programming schedule would look like. And like I said, leveraging the thought partners to be able to share this with the head of schools at True North and say, are we even on the right track, and have affirmation and feedback is really helpful for us in our journey. This is the classical academic programming to align with the schedule. You'll see that literature could have any of those bullets: history, poetry, physical education, science, math, music, art. The benefit of the listening tour and having these thought partners and experts is that as our teachers and our administrators embrace being practitioners, our experts will be there to help us along the way, to be able to connect with the Classical Institute or a head of schools or an instructional coach, whether it be at True North or Jacksonville Classical, to help us in the second semester frame what this learning could look like, creates a really safe space for our kindergarten teachers. They get to explore what this programming looks like with current students. It opens the door for families to provide us feedback. We marketed this one way. Is this how you are experiencing it? So this level of programming is going to be incredibly critical for us as we engage in in-depth professional learning and collaboration spaces to co-design what this will look like to meet the needs of our current students, families, and community in Indian River County. And it's important to bring back around when we first introduced this item, the STEAM pathway, and that timeline was a complementary programmatic timeline feeding into the boutique high school. And I am excited to say we are absolutely on track with the STEAM timeline. Some of you have shared tremendous feedback about visiting STEAM Park, and it really is a fantastic space with technology and coding, and the furniture aligns to it, and just watching students learn through play and grabbing the Lego bins and going to makerspace. It's such a different space than your traditional library media center. And then just to recap, Gifford Middle School was the recipient of the $50,000 grant from Florida Power and Light, and they have that innovation station science wing ready and going, and just that intentional connection for families that's important when they embrace programming or academic programming in the K-5 space. There's somewhere for them to feed into. We can't cultivate these creative learning experiences and all of a sudden they leave 5th grade and there's nowhere for the students to pursue this in the middle school space. So it is important to bring this back around, and I did sneak some photos in here. Here is the Library Media Center pre-STEAM Park on the left, and here is STEAM Park on the right. And everything that you look at, the bottom pictures or the right side pictures have 3D printers printing manipulatives that teachers can take into K2 math classrooms. Each of those tabletop desks have whiteboards, and students are writing and solving problems and trying to figure out how they get their drone to land in a specific area. Each of those books are now organized in science, technology, engineering, arts. It's such a different space, and it's not anywhere, it does not resemble the space on the left at all anymore. It's loud, it's exciting, there are conversations happening, and we are most appreciative when we extend the offer to the community to come walk Steam Park. They absolutely took us up on that, and we have been very busy showing off what this looks like. So it is important that through your authorization to explore these programmatic pathways, movement and positive progression is happening, and this is one example. Very, very quickly from, I don't know, May to today, Steam Park was the vision, and now Steam Park exists and is fully being implemented. And as Dr. Jacobs shared, this is actually our wildly important goal, is to host learning experiences in this space. And we actually have a gifted STEAM Quest experience happening in November, already housed there. And it just, we wanted it to be the hub, and it's shaping up to be the hub in Indian River County. And then this is that return to the programmatic progression. Many of you shared the importance of academies, and that's what this pathway will flow into. On the left side, we have the classical education K-8 space. On the right side, as previously discussed, that's Steam Park at Dodgertown K-5, feeding into 6-8, the Advanced Learning Academy at Gifford Middle School. Both programs following a academy-type pathway, feeding into the boutique high school. The academies, there's so much positive research about what academies offer our students. Anytime you talk about academies to anyone that's familiar with Sebastian River High School, that is their namesake, and anyone who had the opportunity to be a part of those academies speaks so highly of them. So to return to that structure for our community will be, also has been very well received. And then this is our commitment to innovation. You heard it throughout the strategic plan. To actually have innovation anchored in the strategic plan, it demonstrates our commitment. We are revolutionizing how education is experienced in Indian River County, and the inclusion of innovation in the district strategic plan demonstrates that bold and courageous next step to innovate and not be satisfied with maintenance. And we look forward to sharing a RAISE plan, which is what we are coining our innovation plan, and RAISE will be revolutionized, where we accelerate and innovate the student experience, and we look forward to sharing more details about that. Absolutely, the classical K-8 at PI will fall into innovation, as well as Steam Park, and we are just very grateful that the board understands this commitment to creating these future-ready environments for our families and students.
Thank you, Dr. Shafty. This is exciting work, detailed work, and it is really the beginning of what is the next phase for the school district of Indian River County. So with that, we'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Board members?
Just a comment, thank you for all the hard work and development and time from all the personnel to take what really was a conversation and an aspiration and bring it to reality. And, I think it looks tremendous. It looks fantastic. I think it's going to be great for our community.
Dr. Jones?
Again, thank you very, very much. Just two questions. New students going into Pelican that will be part of the magnet will have to go to Sebastian Elementary. When does that start? If they move into the Pelican Island zone, if you will. So obviously our numbers are okay for a while, I think.
They will be fine. So next year's kindergarten is very strategic marketing for that community. If you're a kindergarten without siblings, you would go to Sebastian, and the rest of the kindergartners would be choice.
And will we still have our pre-K there with the KA magnet?
Eventually, we will look at pre-K. We can probably be okay in next year, but in previous years, we're going to have to look at pre-K as well.
The Steam Park, I was one of those, I was there at Dodgertown, marking, as I showed you pictures, marking on those tables where you could just erase. I mean, I've wanted that all my life for kids, where you could just sit at the table and not have to go anywhere else. And no, this is good work. Looking forward to it. looking forward. I mean, the minute, Dr. Moore, you said K-8 magnet, boom. How will that affect our middle schools up there?
Through the chair, the intent here, the design, the desire to go with classical is to meet what we believe is a need for students who are not, or families who are not participating in our program.
Okay.
So this is a very strategic, researched approach to go and offer something that currently doesn't exist, because we believe there are families who would access our school, or this particular school, if the classical model was there.
Okay.
So the goal is not just to, if we just simply fill up Pelican Island and we pull from other schools within our portfolio, ultimately, we're not doing what we've designed ourselves to do. We want to
Okay.
create something unique and expand or increase enrollment to those families.
Good. The Academy's great strength when we had those at Sebastian River High School, because it's a family within, in a high school you had those teams, which is wonderful. And I was at Beachland and Dodgertown on Friday, and Beachland parents were already talking about Gifford Middle and what will be offered there, especially with the FPL grant that they started and so forth. So people are thinking, so thank you.
Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, so I'm excited about this only because it was my item that I brought forth. I have some concerns that I'm surprised board members haven't, maybe they haven't thought about it. This charge was to create a classical school. It wasn't to create a K-8 magnet. It was a classical magnet, not a K-8 magnet. The K-8 came up as a result of further conversation, which is great. It's a secondary plus for us because we don't have a K-8. But the charge was to create a classical school. There's no classical in the name. You're asking for the name of the school to be Pelican Island K-8 magnet. It should be Pelican Island K-8 classical magnet. Classical should be in the name. The driving force of this entire new school should be the classical curriculum, so therefore classical should be in the title. A new parent or a newcomer wanting to move into Vero will go onto our website and they're going to do a search for all of our schools. And sure, somebody might see K-8, great, I want my kid to be in a K-8, wonderful. But that's it. They're just going to see the title. They're not going to see, they might see the grade. But they'd have to do a lot more digging in order to figure out that the approach to learning should be a classical model. But here you have someone who might just look at a title, the name of the school, come into the school and then say, well, I didn't know this was a classical school, I just saw K-8. The idea to create a classical school is to create something new and different, something that would be a bigger attractor than just another average or another magnet school in our county. We have magnets already. Liberty Magnet is Liberty Magnet. Osceola Magnet is Osceola Magnet. Now we're just creating a Pelican K-8 magnet. So where K-8 might be an attractor for some people, classical is not even in the picture. So my recommendation, board members, and I'm hoping for consensus on this, is to add classical in the title. Pelican Island K-8 Classical Magnet School. That's what it is. That's what it should be. The other thing is, I don't see anything, well, I'm going to ask Dr. Shafty to expand on trivium in just a second, because I think that's important. The classical model is really based on the trivium. And for those people who don't really understand what trivium is, I'll give you a moment, if you don't mind, to expand upon that. But I don't see anything in here. I see a model of what the day might look like, but what I don't see is a commitment to the curriculum. What curriculum is it? I was told that it was going to be, that we were going to follow the Florida Department of Education timeline and recommendations for the curriculum. But the Florida Department of Education never, ever considers classical curriculum. They never recommend it. So the moment that I was told that, my antennas went up, because that's like, wait a minute. If we are just going to create the classical model, but only, and give the same curriculum that we're giving everybody else in every other school, then we're just putting lipstick on a pig. Then it's really not classical. If you're going to use the same curriculum and then use the trivium or some other approach to it, it's still not classical. Again, lipstick on a pig. The whole driving force of classical is the actual curriculum. At a very minimum, literature. At a very minimum, literature and the history part of it. Latin, as many know, could be in some of the public schools, because Latin is a big part of the classical education model. Latin could be replaced with Spanish in many, public schools, which is fine. Science, you might be able to get away with, science using some of the other curriculum, but at the bare minimum, for character development and for the trivium and for some of these other specific methodologies that come along with classical, you need traditional classical curriculum, and that's not in this plan. There are suggestions, but it's not the same. So I'm going to throw it out to board members to comment on the title, please, and curriculum, just so that we can get some feedback. If you don't mind, though, I'd like for Dr. Shafty to please share with the public on what is trivium and how does that play a role in classical education.
Sure. So trivium is where the three roads meet, and that is that progression of the elementary to the middle space, how we think about it, configuration to the high school. When we are looking at the K-5 space, that's heavily grounded in the foundational skills that they would need, so the grammar, really. And then as they progress, it would be logic and then rhetoric in the high school spaces. So there is an intentional scaffolding with classical that builds upon each other. And then our commitment is that we have always said we would adhere to the Florida state standards. The standards guide the expectation, the standards guide our accountability. Where we have the opportunity here to be responsive is with curriculum, and that's where we're leveraging our thought partners. We will have additional experiences to share, but as of right now, Walking True North, they use the existing science curriculum, they use the existing social studies curriculum, where they have different pieces, as maybe for their reading block, they are using reading mastery. Potentially, they're bringing in the great books. Maybe for mathematics, they're using Singapore math, but those are all the things we would want to do with the practitioners, who in this case are our administrators and our teachers leading and doing the work. Just with anything else, we wouldn't want to say this is a district directive, here you go, you need to figure it out. Leveraging True North, eventually Jacksonville, and Flagler College to help us frame what this will be like in second semester will be quite powerful. A lot of the things will need to be created from our experience working with schools. The memory that we saw at the particular school that we visited were all self-created documents that built grade level to grade level. Then some of that work was infused through song in PE, and it's going to take us some time to create that. I know some of the feedback we have received is, let's go more than K1 for a phased-in approach. We could do it on paper, but we wouldn't be doing justice to the teachers that have to learn this way of work. And if we are going to uphold the tenets of classical, moving forward from this item will be critical to be a collaboration with the district, most importantly, the school and the practitioners, but then the experts that have been and continue to do this work really well.
So just to add on to that, a full commitment to creating a classical school, that was in fact the charge. We will adhere to the standards, and we will create the curriculum, whether it is additional resources that we purchase and provide, whether it is novels, but there is a clearly defined commitment as it relates to the curriculum itself, ensuring that it does align to the tenets of classical education. In terms of the naming of the school, which I guess you guys are going to discuss now, we went with the structure that's already in place, Pelican Island K-8 school, just like Rosewood is Rosewood Magnet, just like Osceola is Osceola Magnet. It's not Rosewood core knowledge, it's not Osceola STEAM education. It's simply the structure that we currently have. But ultimately, there's a policy that we have in place that we follow for the naming of a school, and we will adhere to that specific policy. But ultimately, the name of a school is the will of the board.
Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, yes, first, I find it both exciting and intriguing, what we're doing in both directions, the classical school as well as the STEAM school. I did have the opportunity to see that, and it's very impressive. It's makes you want to go back to kindergarten and start all over again, because it looks like it'd be a fun way to learn.
I don't know if that's true.
For me, it would. I'm a science guy. So it was exciting. I think for a lot of students, that will really hopefully cause them to excel, resonate with their way of approaching the world and understanding the world. And I think that it brings great value to the school and to the students. Relative to the classical schools, yes, I've had a very strong interest in that. Do have an ongoing concern about what our curriculum will end up looking like. It's good that we have a couple of local partners that we can both contact with and be involved with and share with. I continue to encourage us, if we haven't, I don't know if you've had any contact directly yet with Hillsdale, but they're generally considered to be one of the leaders in the country with over, I think it's 100 different schools that they are mentoring, that they have set up and started, in which they do that set up to start, provide the curriculum, as well as provide mentoring at no cost. I always like no cost because I'm penurious, but also they've got a lot of experience, and so I think that would be something that we should try and tap into, at least to consider it. In terms of the naming, having that in the name probably would not hurt. I think it would always help, because again, as Dr. Moore mentioned, his goal, and I think a right one, is to try and attract those people who are specifically not involved in our school district for the purpose of, or one of the larger purposes of having a classical education for their children in that format. So while K-8 is attractive, classical will be attractive, and there is the loss on a marketing basis of, if it's not in the name, it's not necessarily on the mind. So something we want to take consideration of. You would hate to know that there are families that are looking, they don't look deep enough, far enough, and miss that opportunity and don't embrace the school district as a result. So I think that's at least a valuable marketing concept for us to be thinking about. The other is in terms of just the outcome of what you ultimately design for the curriculum, obviously is so important, because particularly starting with kindergarten, first grade, families will really quickly discern what the real nature is of what our offering is. And for those, so if we have 30, 20 or 30 students, 50 students, whatever our initial class size is, those families will quickly communicate, particularly if we're talking about families that may or may not be considering homeschooling. That group communicates a lot. They will communicate amongst themselves, and the success or failure of this model will pivot on what their impression of that is, and if we're actually delivering what they think we're delivering. So I know you understand that. I'm reiterating that the curriculum is more than anything. K-8 is nice and convenient. It'd be great to have your children all together, but I don't see a lot of parents that specifically say, I'm going to change schools, move districts for K-8, but I know a lot of them are saying, I'm going to keep my kids home and give up my day to train them in a classical way. So I think that is a real powerful need, and hopefully as a result, as Dr. Moore says, we can fill that with the majority of new students who otherwise wouldn't be using our school district.
Is it the data that makes you say that? Did you
What's
look
that?
at the data that said that parents are choosing classical versus K-8?
No, what I'm saying is, I understand there's also parents and families that find the K-8 as attractive, and it's great to have that. It's great to actually have both. But I'm saying relative to the classical portion of that, a lot of homeschool families are using a classical curriculum now, and that's our prime target base that we want to draw back into the school district, or we want to draw
when they're considering putting their children in, we want to draw them on their interest for that classical education. So we don't want to miss that opportunity.
I understand that, but I've also heard from homeschool parents that said that they like a smaller school size and the K-8 model because they don't want their children transitioning to middle school and then to high school. I've heard that a lot.
I think they're all attractive features.
Yeah,
So
so
I
I
think
think
having
looking
it
at
is
the
good.
data that came back from our surveys would really be important. I think that the data showed also that both are important.
Yeah, I agree, and it's great we have them both. I would just, I know that for those that understand and are concerned with the curriculum, that will be a very significant factor for them.
Say
Just
something,
a
Renee.
factor through the chair, for the board to consider. It really won't be a full classical school until 3 years out.
Right.
We need to factor that into the master school ID that we submit to the state, that when a name is submitted to the state, it reflects the programming. What we are committed to doing is when we update this upcoming school year for the K-8 expansion, we will identify through the MSID submission that we are providing classical programming in grades K and 1. But that is important, that if a school is carrying the brand, we should think about carrying that brand when the entirety of the school represents that programming. We have 2 separate programming pieces happening at the same time for the first 3 years of this plan.
So I'd like to say thank you for bringing that up, because that was one of my points that I wanted to bring is when you change the name of a school, it doesn't mean you just change the signs. You actually have to apply to the state, and you have to go through all of that bureaucracy, paperwork, everything else, application, and then get approval. It's not, we can just name it. So that's one particular thing that we need to consider. Classical isn't new. I learned in classical. I think it's a new approach for parents today, that they're going, well, that's the way I learned, so I want my children to learn that way. I get that. But it's not something that's new. As a matter of fact, I go back to my Latin roots all the time. And being in science, Latin is extremely important. So I really appreciate the fact that we're going to be infusing Latin in here somehow. So I think that's really great for kids. The small size for all of these programs that we're looking at, Boutique High School and everything else, is a huge attractor for parents. They don't want their kids at big, huge schools. The K-8, I've heard overwhelmingly that parents want that because they're so, if you look at our numbers with that transition going to middle school, that is a huge concern for parents. I have talked to parents, my own daughter is one, that says, I'm afraid in kindergarten, I love this school, but then I'm afraid what's going to happen when they leave 5th grade. And that's it's, when you have middle school, and I've taught middle school for years, I still do, what happens is you have kids from all these different little elementary schools now all coming together and wanting to be king of the hill. And that king of the hill posturing is where we have so many of the fights and problems in middle school, is you have all these kids coming together for the first time. They don't kumbaya and make friends right away. So that's part of the problem that parents have. They're concerned about that, rightfully so. And you know, that's always a competitive issue that middle schools deal with. So I think offering this for those parents that have those concerns is a really great thing. I'd like to see more K-8s, as I've mentioned before. Jacksonville Classical, is that a public school or a private school?
I think it's a public charter.
Okay. And so do they use, if it's charter, then they don't use a religious, okay, so that's a good one to partner with. How about True North?
Not religious-based.
Great. And how about Flagler?
Flagler College?
Yes.
I don't want to overspeak, we just had an initial outreach, but their Classical Institute is comprised of experts and adjuncts. But I don't know much more than our initial outreach, and that they offer statewide, state-endorsed professional learning for
And
their
they're here in our
classical.
state.
And they're here in our state.
They're close. Okay, great. Originally, when we talked about this, you know, we looked at would Amplify work, would Singapore Math be one. I was really happy to hear about Singapore Math because I know Singapore Math was used here in our district a few years ago, and so was Everyday Math. I taught Everyday Math. I loved Everyday Math.
Do.
We held on to our books when they said we can't do it anymore at Highlands, back when it was Highlands, and we held on to them like this.
I kept my calendar.
When they
mapped
came
it.
to take them, because
I agree.
Kindergarten.
we saw our math scores jump because our kids were learning differently and thinking math instead of just doing math. Singapore works for kids that really need that practice, and so not every child is the same. So I get the fact that parents have that choice now to say, oh, you know, I'd like my child to learn this way. I think they'd do better in that math program versus that one. I get it. We should have variety in schools. We shouldn't all be cookie cutter curriculum programs. It's easier for the district if you have the same curriculum in every school. I get that. But I think the uniqueness of different things out there would be unique for the school as well. And I'd like to see that, you know, for the STEM schools as well. Everyday math is still around, just saying. I think the Dewey Decimal System is being revamped, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah, and I saw that when I went to Dodgertown and looked at the books and how they're coordinating them.
Genreification.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it. And I was like, oh, this is really going to throw off a true traditional librarian. Because they're going to say, how do you find the book? Well, everything now is in the computer, so you can find the book. Back when we had to look through the little cards, Dewey Decimal System was extremely important, so I get that. I'm excited about this. As far as the name goes, the problem with that, and I get putting classical in there, I get that, but we need to treat the other magnet schools kind of the same way. It's not fair that we're saying Osceola Magnet, Rosewood Magnet, Liberty Magnet, and then classical school. So if we do that, we're looking at name changes for all of our magnet schools, and we're looking at signage, and that's money. So we really need to consider that. Plus, it's not going to be a magnet school totally until it totally transitions. And I agree with you stair-stepping and scaffolding because you work out problems one grade level at a time so that it doesn't fail. You know, you want it to be successful, so you want to make sure that you're looking at, okay, we brought our kindergartners in, and our first grade's coming in now, and then we got this now. We've got it figured out, and we can add faster, which I saw that you did. You already made that change. But I think bringing it in K to 8 immediately, thank God you didn't do that, because I have seen that happen before, and it fails. And I don't want it to fail. I want it to be successful for the parents and the kids that choose this school. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Dr. Jones?
Thank you very much for all of this information. Really good detail. And we all know we have to come out of the box to get our kids back, and I appreciate that. As far as the name, and I'm sorry I walked out a little bit, we would have to follow, Dr. Moore, the policy for the new name, 7250? Okay. Whatever it may be. I agree with, you know, it's not Rosewood Core Learning or Osceola STEAM or Liberty IB, but we've got to be consistent there. I did visit the Pineapple Charter School, Melbourne, K-8, and got to tour with the principal, and I remember her saying, number one, they follow the standards, and it was like a 3-year process to really kind of get the flow of everything and going, but she was very excited about the school. That's a charter school, but looked like things were going very well. I just want to say out there to our middle school parents, and I was at Gifford Middle person who opened Gifford Middle 6, 7, and 8, and there was a big to-do with VBE not sending the students to 6th grade. A lot of issues there. But I also want to say, while I know some students want that smaller, our middle schools are good. They're there for our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. They help the transition going into 9th grade. And I remember experiencing our parents were more, I won't say afraid, but you had to really win them over there with the kids. And I think our middle school principals do a lot with that. And each parent, each child, they might like a smaller one, they might like a larger school. And I think by doing this K-8 and having our boutique high school and that flow from STEAM, we're giving more options. So if that large high school is not for them, we've got a smaller one. If that large middle school isn't for them, you can look here. Because I think it's important that they are going to choose where they believe their child can succeed. But, you know, just in general, when I look at all of this, I see really great potential, and I know it won't happen overnight with the curriculum. I know we'll have to kind of flow into it. But good job, good beginning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Moore?
All right, our next item.
I still have follow-up.
she said
we
Dr.
didn't hear from Dr.
Oh.
Posca on the name and the curriculum.
I mean, it sounds like we probably have some time to discuss the name further. I don't know that we need to come to any kind of consensus today. I think we could be missing out if we don't include classical somehow in the messaging. I understand conceptually you want to try to name each school in the exact same way, but I think this is a very unique school. I don't know that it aligns with these other schools in their naming process. So if our goal is to attract ultimately really customers to the district, getting the messaging right is going to be important. We should consider, exactly how we want to name that school, or, how we go about this. So there's more conversations we should probably have about it. Obviously, it sounds like you guys are committed to a classical curriculum and
100%.
developing that. Clearly, that's going to take a lot of time and work and information and partnerships, which you're already developing. But my hope is that, obviously that commitment is obviously true. And your goal is to have a classical curriculum there.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes, Dr. Jones?
go ahead.
Dr. Jones has a follow-up.
And I apologize, I walked out. It said Pelican Island K-8 magnet, and then a classical approach underneath it? Okay, all right. And that would be how it would be marketed?
Yes.
Okay.
But that takes away from the consensus that you just heard right now. That's not applying classical or including classical in the title.
We
A
didn't have
classical
consensus
approach
on
wouldn't
that.
be in the title.
I didn't hear consensus on that, Ms. Rosario. It was you bringing it
I heard
forward.
1, 2, 3.
We were talking about the fact that it needs to be a process. The state requires you to go through a process.
The state doesn't require you to go through a process
To
for the
name a
change,
school?
for the name, if
Yeah.
you're opening up a new school, but we're not opening up a new school.
It's to
It's
change the
same-
name of a
it's
school.
Change the name of a school,
Yeah,
it follows our policy.
To change the master school ID is for new and revisions to existing names. We'd have to follow state
You're
procedures.
changing the what?
Any change, any new school naming or a change to a school name, we would have to submit a change to the state with the MSID.
Yeah, but that's different than what, it's not a brand new, I understand what you're saying, but submitting the name change through that process, if it's not written down in what comes to, anything that you're talking about now, if it's not written down and captured in writing before we vote on it, it doesn't exist. Dr. Moore could leave tomorrow, and that could leave this completely wide open. The idea is if you don't have commitment written down in writing so that it is voted on, because something is coming to us at the next business meeting, if it's not in writing that a commitment to classical curriculum is in the plans, if that is not there, then it doesn't exist. If a commitment to eventually change the name to include classical in it is not there, it doesn't exist. It needs to be there for us to have confidence that that is what's going to happen. I've been with Dr. Moore enough to know that he may say something sometimes, one time, and then it changes 2 weeks later. Oh, circumstances changed. Oh, this changed. Oh, that changed. So then the commitment that you made 2 weeks ago doesn't currently exist. So my point is, if this is something that's big enough, that is important enough that we are voting on, then we need to be able to have the commitment that if it is classical, that it will be written down. There will be a commitment to classical. One example has been Latin. I've had conversation about having Latin in there because that's big to classical education, and I was told it's not going to be in there, as wonderful as we like it, because it's not. Instead, they'll consider Spanish. So what happens when you get to the second or the third grade when they start to infuse, in the traditional classical, when they start to infuse Latin in there, we will hear, oh, we're not going to do that. But we don't know that because it's not in writing. If you don't have something in writing, it doesn't exist. Things can change. And if we are going to move forward in this, it needs to be done right. We can't just say, well, we trust you. If we're going to move in that direction, let's do it the right way, and let's require that we get a written commitment to these things, because that is the basis of classical. That is the foundation of it.
Madam Chair.
Dr.
I want to
Jones.
make a follow-up conversation.
Dr. Jones.
I'm still talking. I
You're
want to make
constantly
a follow-up on the math. I think everyday math is great. Singapore math is also great. Love Singapore. That is, both of those are classical. Math UC is a classical model. All of those are fantastic. They're mastery-based. They're not spiral-based. Much of the public school math curriculum is spiral, but a lot of the, most of the math classical is mastery-based, and I think that makes a huge difference. So again, part of something else that I did not see that shows up in classical curriculum models and plans is penmanship. Penmanship is typically within the classical curriculum that I don't see in any of the models here. So usually, like for example, Memoria Press. Memoria Press has on their website, they have a second grade outline of, what second grade would look like, complete. And you would see Latin and grammar together. You would see then penmanship, and then math, literature, science, American studies, and then some enrichment. So I don't see penmanship here. I'd like you to talk about penmanship because that's important. And then the other part, I want to mention PE because PE was on your slide as included with the other specials. But PE is not to be, if we're following the standards, which everybody should, even if you're a charter school, you're following the standards. PE is supposed to be not treated like any other special. Students are required to have 150 minutes of PE per week, plus 100 minutes of unstructured play. And what I saw was a combination of including PE and the other specials. So I just want to make sure that that doesn't.
So we have teacher-directed PE for the 30 minutes on the right from 11:05 to 11:35, as well as a unique specials block in the afternoon.
Okay, but you see that unique specials? It's combined with physical ed, art, and music.
It's just that special could be either one of those.
Okay, but what I'm saying is every single day, there should be a separate block for PE. Instruction and non-instruction, there should be two separate blocks. PE shouldn't be in the same block with art and music. We went through this last year. 2 years ago here. So there should be a 150, right, 30 minutes a day for directed PE, and then 20 minutes a day for play, unstructured play. But you can't put 20 minutes of unstructured play with art and music every single day of the week, because then you're sharing that time with the unstructured play. It should be unstructured play, not with anything else, if that makes any sense.
Are you done?
Yes.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. First of all, Dr. Moore, thank you for your commitment to the school district and consistently trying to make it better by different options. So that's number one. Number two, policy 7250, which I know very well because I just went through it. And again, thank you to the board for the proclamation for Dr. Hudson. And it says, existing in new facilities. The board will consider requests to name or rename, which we're doing, existing or new schools in facilities within a school, such as a stadium, media center, and so forth. So in other words, it's very clearly written what we have to do to rename a school, whatever it may be, and then the work group gives it to us, and then we vote. So we just have to make sure that we follow policy 7250. I'm not as familiar with the state policy as far as the naming and renaming, but That is what we wrote about a year ago, which I followed meticulously to make sure that we could have the administrative suite named after Dr. Hudson. So, you know, whatever it may be, and when it comes to the board to vote, then we'll vote.
Go ahead, Dr. Moore.
But that would include then, when this comes to us for a vote, it shouldn't say K-8. Because we didn't follow that process yet.
So, Dr. Moore, can you look at the policy?
No, I'll
make
look at
sure
the
you're
policy,
following
but
it?
my
Okay.
intent and what would come in October, we'd have to rework the item itself to identify what the proposed name would be. If it's name A, and then by year X, it becomes year B, or name C, however the board would want to do it. But you would have to identify when there would be a name change, whether it's K-8, whether you can keep K-8, but whether you want to include classical within the naming of the particular school.
But we're voting on this at the end of the month.
Correct.
So that decision would have to be now.
Wait. If we're following the procedure that I think Doc Jones just did with renaming something, why are we all of a sudden not doing the same procedure? It would require all of the
Community
things
forum.
that we had to do before, which is a parent group study and all that stuff.
Correct, but you would
Okay.
need the name in which to take to the parent group. So you would be taking a name to the particular
So then
PTA
we
and say,
vote on just
Would it?
taking this name to the parent group, is that what you're saying?
I think it would be more efficient to say that in the parent group, this is what we want to change the name of the school to.
So the parents would come up with
Yes,
that?
versus
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
No, not necessarily. You could just tell them, this is the plan, we need a name.
Could we just
is-
follow the procedure that we have already in place and
That
not
is
make it
what
up right
I
here?
want
I know,
them-
just follow the procedure, please. Thank you.
As-
But that would
Okay, can we
affect
move
what he
on?
brings to us in October. That
Okay.
affects what he brings to us in October. He
Okay.
cannot bring to us a K-8 name or renamed or potential rename unless we go through that process.
Can we move on?
Yes, we can move on, and the name, because we don't offer sixth grade until the following school year, so we can continue to have conversations regarding the name
Thank you.
in future workshops.
Thank you.
So what is the name you're going to bring to us then?
Right now, I'm going to bring the initiative itself, Pelican Island Elementary School will be the name with a classical approach, and then once we have consensus from the board on what the name should be, I can initiate the process.
So if we were to give you consensus now, you would initiate the process tomorrow? I mean,
Why is there such a push to do it right now?
there
Is it
isn't.
to do it
I'm
before
asking,
November?
and I'm having a conversation, please. Thank you. Dr. Moore, if you had consensus today, what you're saying is you can initiate that process tomorrow or the next day or next week.
It
Is
would
that
be-
correct?
Yes, after the workshop, after the board meeting, I'm sorry. But I do not, the policy doesn't say go to PTA and say, hey, guys, what do you want the name of the school to be? It says this is the suggested, there's a reason to have that. So it would be preferred, from my perspective, to say the board has approved an item to go through the implementation of policy, rename the school, whatever it is, and the suggested name is Pelican Island K-8 Classical, Pelican Island K-8. So my intent is, in the next meeting, to say one of two things, and we can continue the conversation now or continue in 2 months. Hey, it will include classical, and then I can begin the process. Do we absolutely have to change the name of the school in the next meeting? The answer is no, because it still is going to be, it won't be a K-8 for another, we'll start sixth grade, which in my mind, that would be the appropriate time to do it.
But
So-
you will start the classical
Yes,
curriculum.
the classical theme model, which is an unwavering commitment, which shouldn't be questioned, is going to happen. I think as we create the item, whatever the item is going to include, will include very specific language that says that that is in fact a commitment. So we can approve the content, the design of the school, and still be able to move forward without absolutely renaming the school in our October board meeting.
And what about the commitment to curriculum?
That's what I was trying to communicate. Yes, that will be there.
In the plan?
Yes.
that Written in there commitment to, that we will have a commitment to classical curriculum.
And we will mark this moment in time and use those exact words.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Barry, I'm so sorry, Ms. Barrymore.
Can we now move on? Okay, go ahead.
Just one thing, I guess I have to ask, then why did I have to go through a community forum with a work group being established? I want to read this to all of you. The work group will recommend no more than 3 names to the superintendent.
There you go.
All right.
With advice from the Superintendent's Leadership Council, will consider the determination of the work group and make a recommendation to the board. So I just don't think that we say, this is what it's going to be called. I think they give us 2 or 3 names and we look at it. That's how it is written.
All right, so through the chair, so I stand corrected. We'll follow that policy as it is written, and we'll come back to you with what those 3 recommendations would be, and we'll effectively articulate the concern regarding what the appropriate name should be.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take a recess because it's over 2 hours, and I'd like to use the facility.
All right,
2:15.
we gotta hurry.
It is 2:22. We're going to resume our workshop. Dr. Moore?
Thank you. I'll present the next item for Mr. Seymour, who's in the shelter meeting as we speak. And this is the request for approval for Unique Learning Systems. This is the access point curriculum that we have been using for a number of years. But now the price exceeds the $50,000 threshold, so now we're bringing it to the board for ultimate approval.
Okay. Board members, anybody have a comment? No, moving on.
All right, items E through I will be presented by Mr. Green.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Through the chair. The first item is the approval of employee laptop refresh. The laptops that we have about a 5-year cycle. However, one of the issues that we have are the batteries going dead maybe in 2 years, a year, 2.5 to 3 years. A lot of deficient batteries. And a lot of times the batteries are not under warranty. They could be $150 or more for just the battery. So this is actually going with some Lenovo laptops that have a 3-year battery warranty included and accidental included. These are for employees and teachers in the schools. It's 150 laptops at $774 each. Again, with accidental and 3-year battery warranty for your approval. The total is about $150,000. Okay. The next item is piggybacking an Omnia contract for contracted services to refurbish air handlers. It's about 8 large air handlers at Sebastian River High School, which is about half the campus. This is through Weatherproofing Technologies. The total is $1.4 million roughly, with a $54,000 reserve for a project that would be done most likely over the summer coming up. But the lead, as we've talked about, the lead time on getting parts and equipment now is months out. So this is to get us the ability to get those things ordered and have it ready and scheduled for that project.
Board members, we're good?
Just a quick question. I don't think I asked this previously, but how old are those current air handlers?
These are, well, I'll let Dr. Jones answer. These are 20, yeah. And they're over 20 years. One of the issues we are seeing, though, with newer air handlers district-wide, to get the efficiencies, the energy efficiencies, a lot of the materials are thinner and they're more aluminum instead of the heavy-duty piping that we used to see. So a lot of times you're seeing 12 to 14 years out of a life of a condenser, where we're replacing compressors that are 30 years old at Rosewood Magnet. They're failing, but they're 30 years old and they look like military grade. They're painted blue. The pipes are really heavy. So that is an issue as well. Just the longevity of air conditioning equipment in general is not as long as it used to be.
So these can be extended somewhat indefinitely if we continue to repair them?
Yes.
I'm in the process of replacing my second air conditioner this week, and I know that the problems with those air handlers, so I realize that I had to replace mine because it's almost 20 years old.
The only issue we run into when it gets 20 or 30 years old as Rosewood is compatibility issues, and then sometimes we're having to do a complete lift on 6 of the units and replace them because you can't get parts that fit it anymore.
Okay.
So you're saying they don't make things like they used to?
They don't.
But you can keep them going if you're,
Oh,
what you're saying.
absolutely.
That's good.
If they don't get wiped out by a hurricane because they're not
In which case, insurance.
huge. True. And then the insurance goes up.
Madam Chair, the next item, G, review approval to amend agenda item for multiple contractors for CMAR, Construction Management at Risk. So on July 25th of 2022, the board approved item 7E to award multiple contractors for CMAR, Construction Management at Risk. Those are for continuing construction contracts with an estimated project not to exceed $4 million. Well, statute 255.103 Florida statute has been amended, and it's raised that limit to $7.5 million that you can use for continuing contracts. Well, Neola's actually picked that up, and we're working that through the board policy revisions as those will come forward. This item would keep the same terms and conditions of that original item, the same vendors, but would increase the amount of the continuing contract per to $7.5 million. Of course, any projects would be approved by the board.
Board members?
Mr. Green, you said that this was actually going to be changed in the current revisions of the policies that haven't yet come to us yet. Yes, that's what I meant to say. They haven't yet come to us. The district is reviewing them, and what will come before us is the change.
What will come before you is the change in board policy.
Right.
This is going ahead and requesting the change to that contract item to increase to that limit. That will be adjusted in the board policy.
And when is that? When will that happen?
I'm not sure when those are coming forward, to be honest. I know we're reviewing the next set.
December?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair, item H is to award the invitation to bid for contracted HVA mechanical services. We're on air conditioner day today. These are vendors who participated in a bid process, and we are asking for approval to award that to Midstate Mechanical, Sherman Mechanical, Train, and Farmer and Irwin. It's an estimated $500,000 spend. This is a 3-year contract with 2 one-year annual renewals, which is our general policy of doing, which we can leverage if the pricing is advantageous to us after the 3rd year of that contract.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the last item, I, is the disposal of surplus property. So the list, which is less than a page this time, is the majority of these items are for career and technical programs at our high schools. The vast majority of items are 15 to 30 years old. They're from automotive and AV classrooms, and these are going for the standard surplus on the board meeting in October.
I have one comment about that. I walked on, when I was walking the technical college, and we went in the HVAC system. I know IRSC used to have that facility, and then they left. And there were a bunch of things just left there. A lot of them they didn't want, so I guess we had to get rid of them. What's the status of all that?
Through the chair, to be honest, I am not familiar.
Oh, it was
So
a mess.
through the chair, they just recently decided not to continue that specific program, so I'm working with the president to maintain certain things and then for them to pick up other things. So
Yeah,
there-
because there was a huge thing.
Yeah, there are some things that obviously we would want to keep and maintain for our own programming,
Yeah, I don't know if that one can be used.
and some
so-
things not.
Okay, but we are working with them
Yep,
to
yep.
see. Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
And then the final item is the review of the proposed new policy, 2750, Board Commitment to Unitary Status and Annual Reporting. I'll have Dr. Shafty present that item.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Through the chair, we're tasked with rewriting a policy reflective of the feedback from each of the board members. Before opening it up to the board members for discussion, I will talk you through a little bit about the context of the rewrite so that you can make and have an informed discussion. So as we approach this, after seeking guidance from legal counsel as well as counsel overseeing the current desegregation order case, there was a strong recommendation that we cite the green factors as the work beyond sustaining unitary status. The reason for that is green is a precedent case in which school districts typically show that they have satisfied and they are not operating 2 separate school systems. So while it is called the green factors, and maybe that's a newer term that we've introduced as of recently, it is not a new case. And the last 3 or 4 districts that have attained unitary status or achieved unitary status in the state of Florida, their court documents reference those green factors. So that information was shared with you through email about 2 weeks ago before we were going through this process with Hurricane Helene. Additionally, some feedback from board members was a focus, even though the green factors do not include academic achievement, the board members have indicated that that is a very important closing the achievement gap or seeking to close the achievement gap. So on the rewrite, under superintendent commitment, section A, we have a expectation that the superintendent is committed through the work of the district strategic plan as aligned to Florida's state-approved ESSA plan to maintain awareness of each of Florida's reporting subgroups through an academic lens, which the subgroups include major racial and ethnic groups as listed in the rewrite of the policy. As well as in section B, the green factors are listed, citing the green court case. And the 6 areas are student assignments, facilities, faculty, staff, transportation, and extracurricular activities. So I'm sure you may have some additional feedback, but we wanted to open it up to the board to have that discussion in this space so we can capture that information.
Okay, I'm sure there's somebody that wants to talk about this one. Mr. McDonald, you want to go first?
Sure. Actually, yeah, I've read through it. I think what you've composed here is very good. I think it really does not only hit the right targets, but the right tone, and it will help, hopefully, to ensure not only we have unitary status, but that we are addressing those particular student needs and being responsive, as I know Dr. Moore and the whole board are currently doing, but this documents it, and it makes this a long-term goal and objective of ours to have that at the center of our process. I see we also include an ongoing relationship with the NAACP, which is a positive thing as well, because they have a lot of input, a lot of concern for this. So I think that's good and important that they're part of that ongoing strategy.
Okay. Anyone else? Dr. Pasco?
I think the policy is good. I think it captures what we were trying to do, and that's our commitment to continue unitary status. So I think the rewrite is an improvement over the prior policy I would support.
Okay. Ms. Rosario?
I think it's great. It's definitely something that we've been talking about for a while. It just very succinctly captures the will of the board without adding anything extra that complicates the language of what the intent is supposed to be. The only thing that I have concerns with is because up until now, we have not, up until very recently, we have not addressed the term or used the term green factors. And so my only concern is that we're not being completely clear on what that is. And so I was just wondering if we could put maybe a little asterisk on the bottom, you know, I don't know, some other little explanation, maybe in parentheses or something that just says, you know, referencing the case, the green case, or that's where it comes from, or something to that effect. Or maybe even a definition of what green factors is. That's my only concern, because it's just not mentioned anywhere. It's not even in the 2018 joint plan. The elements are in there, but the term green factor is not in there. So rather than add more language than is necessary, if we just kind of define it there somewhere, I think it would just be a little bit more clear.
Good. Okay, Dr. Jones?
Said something with superintendent commitment. There was a revised part. Did you send that to us yet?
It's under superintendent commitment, section A, the very first section was in the draft previously sent, focusing on student achievement.
Okay, revised part A under superintendent, okay. And B, when we list the green factors, it does not say student achievement. Are we going to add that?
So student achievement is captured in commitment A through the subgroups, similar to how we have, not only do we choose to report, but we have to report that way through the state of Florida. And then B references the green factor. So A coupled with B captures the intent of the joint plan to maintain and sustain the work.
Okay, I do agree that we need to have the green factors spelled out so people really understand what it means. And board members, you know that, I've said this several times, this was written 2130 so that we would never put this work on the shelf, that we would continue to monitor it, whether Dr. Moore is here, whether we're here, or anyone's here, and I think that's very, very important. Now, so as far as the changes on 2130, and this is a change, it's basically saying it doesn't exist anymore, we're going to the new policy. When would this come to the board for a vote, and supermajority is required as far as policy 2130?
So this is not that policy. This would be a brand-new policy. This would be 2750. The title 2130 was sent to repeal at the last board meeting, and it will come back to the board right now, scheduled in November, because we did not have a total of 28 days in between the September and October board meeting, or September and October board meeting.
Okay. The one thing about this new policy, and it has to be in there, is that you will have a annual written report to the board at a publicly noticed meeting, and it'll be provided to the NAACP 7 days in advance of the meeting, because, I was really concerned with the first policy, crossing out NAACP, just crossing them out. So you meeting with them 7 days in advance of the meeting, I think will be very, very important. And if we put this in policy, whoever is superintendent would have to do it. So that's one thing I wanted to look at by September 1st of each year. Because even when you look at the PowerPoint that we received from August on the achievement gap, we still have 25 points in language, arts, and math between black and white students. So that's something we have certainly improved on, but we cannot stop. So those are my comments for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, the green factors was kind of an interesting thing for me to kind of note too, and I look forward to an individual meeting with you and the superintendent to kind of go dive into this a little deeper so that I have a really clear understanding of how this is going to help us move forward and help us pretty much solve, the situation we're in with the DSEG order. Thank you.
Madam Chair, one more question.
Yes.
This policy is separate, obviously, from the 2018 joint plan as far as the expectations, or somewhat different. This does not override the 2018 joint plan because that's a court case. That was signed. Is that correct, Ms. Shattuck?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Rosario?
So that was something that I had concerns with, that we wanted a policy that actually included the 2018 joint plan, because that's what we are bound by right now. And until that changes otherwise, that's what is before us. Instead, this policy doesn't mention the court case or the 2018 joint plan. What I was told is that instead, the attorney suggested to use the green factors, which are actually in the 2018 joint plan. So the green factors are those things that we are addressing within the 2018 joint plan. It is the student achievement. Student assignments, the facilities, faculty, staff, transportation, and extracurricular activities. Those are supposed to be considered the green factors, even though we're not mentioning the 2018 joint plan. I don't even know why we have green factors in there. It should say the 6 areas that are in the 2018 joint plan and leave it at that. But I agree with you, Dr. Jones. Although I didn't hear you, I agree with your concern over that.
Again, just one more comment with this. As far as, I know A directs the information on student achievement, but within the joint plan, that is one of the 10 components, student achievement specifically listed. So we just cannot forget that, however this comes out, as what we're doing as a board. And I know this policy is that we will continue it, and like I said, as long as superintendent meeting with the NAACP and having that collaborative discussion. That's good.
Okay.
And then that concludes my items. So,
Okay, so we have a discussion item here. It is the superintendent's contract. It says, in recognition of the remarkable accomplishments of STIRC over the past 4 years, the superintendent's current salary has been assessed in comparison to those of other district superintendents across the state and in similar districts. The board has taken into account its desire to retain him for ongoing leadership of our district. With a vote of consequently, during the September 23rd, 2024 business meeting, the board reached a decision with a vote of 4-1 to instruct the board attorney to prepare a contract amendment for further discussion regarding his compensation. I'd like to defer to our attorney to go over the contract, please.
Thank you, Chair Berenborg. Yes, so at the last meeting, it was raised by Dr. Pasca, a motion to increase the compensation of the superintendent's contract based on the exceptional service he's provided to the board. And so your direction drafted a brief first amendment to the superintendent's contract, which is provided for you here, as well as his contract for ease of reference. It would just make changes to section 4A and 4B of the agreement, which are to the base salary and to the deferred compensation. To the base salary, it would change it to $239,000. That was the number that was posited by Dr. Pasca at the meeting. He also suggested changing the deferred compensation to 10% of the base salary. I did initially draft it that way, but then in conversation with the superintendent, he said he wasn't going to ask for 10%. He said just change it to 7.8%. So that's what I did and have presented for you here. It would be, the base salary would be for the fiscal year, which would be from July 1st, 2024, ending June 30th, 2025. And then after that, for each fiscal year thereafter, the superintendent would receive his base salary, but then also if he receives an overall performance rating of satisfactory or greater, he would also be eligible for an increase based on the same that's granted to other 12-month administrators if one's given to them. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any questions about it.
Dr. Pasca, you want to start?
I mean, I don't really have anything further to add based on our conversations last time. You know, I think that I think this is a very reasonable and appropriate right sizing of his salary. And, you know, my part of my arguments for such an increase is, which I stated last time, is that if we were to lose him, I think it would probably cost a lot more to find an adequate replacement. So, I think to me, it's a no-brainer, and I'm ready to move forward.
Dr. Jones?
Ditto. Good.
Okay. Mr. McDonald?
Similar. Yeah, I've also been in favor of this, and I think it's a good move, and not even in light of the cost of replacement. I've known the problem of trying to replace people, and I've always been very cautious about shooting yourself in the foot, because you can't always get anyone nearly as good, and it's very hard to get anyone nearly as good to replace Dr. Moore. But just more importantly, it's appropriate when a significant shift happens in compensation in the marketplace, that we be sensitive to that, we be sensitive to the tremendous successes that we have had, we expect, because I won't be around, but I have given him an early congratulations for being #1 in the state for next year. So I think compensation that matches that is appropriate, and I think that the relative salaries that we're using to compare this put this in a very good relative position, so I think it's completely justifiable. Thank you.
Mr. Rosario?
Though I think that proper compensation should be due, I don't disagree that the superintendent has done a great job thus far. I don't know how Dr. Pasca came to that number. I have concerns that it might be quite excessive. You have to take into you have to take into consideration the totality. We're not just giving him $239,000. It's $239,000 plus $800 a month for a car stipend, plus the 7.8% for deferred compensation, plus $7,500 for the incentive for the, for getting certification, which that has already happened. I mean, that's a total of $275,000. $275,342. That's a lot of money. And I think for a small district, we haven't even talked with Mr. Green. Can we afford it? And there is nothing in the contract that says that he can't come to us again next year and ask for another increase once he gets the district to all of our schools being in an A. And then where would the limit be then? When do we draw the limit that another 20,000, another 30, another 40,000? I mean, at what point? There doesn't seem to be any boundaries here. And so, though I am in favor of he deserves a raise, I just don't know if this is, I don't think that this is the right raise. In my one-on-one with the superintendent, he actually said that he was looking for and asking for 225. So I don't know where you got the 330, 239. It might be your own, but for me, he was willing to go to 225. And the deferred compensation never came up. He said, if I do get an increase with the deferred compensation, that's fine. If not, that's fine too. So if this was in our one-on-one, I'm kind of concerned that there might be, and this is the only time that we can talk. I don't want to make an accusation, but it seems very high. Excessive is the only thing that I can think of. You look at St. Lucie, and just in general, I mean, St. Lucie's superintendent is making $190,000. And he has, and that's $14,000 less than the previous superintendent. They have their 50 schools, 45,000 students, and we have 27 schools with 15,000 students. So we're going to wind up paying Dr. Moore a whole lot more than the number of schools, which again, I don't want to sound like he doesn't deserve, or he does deserve a raise. Dr. Moore, you deserve a raise. I just am concerned. I'm being fiscally responsible, if you want to say, maybe frugal. I'm not sure what the word would be, but we did not consider this amount for, as far as I'm concerned, for our teachers or our other workers. We haven't even talked about our district leaders. Their contract hasn't even come before us. The superintendent said he was willing to wait until we did their contract first, and then the next thing you know, that changed. So now he's coming first before them. So I'm not so sure yes?
I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you not done? I
was not done. I was in the middle of talking. But go ahead.
Okay. When you said that the superintendent for St. Lucie makes 190, he was at 190, but they changed that.
To what?
To 240,000.
When was that changed?
August 2023.
Okay, so this was in 2022. So in 1 year, because his contract was for a 3-year contract.
Yes.
So a year later, they changed it to what?
240,000.
Okay.
That's not all of it, right? There's pluses. That's,
No, there's more. There's incentives. Martin County is currently at 235, as you all know, and that's over 4 years for a 4-year contract. Other districts, No, Martin County also gets a car. So he doesn't get the $800 supplement, he gets a district car assigned to him. So, I mean, I think we need to be realistic. It's a whole lot more for way fewer schools, way fewer students. And I don't know where you go in between. I mean, again, he was willing to settle at 225. Are we also willing to engage and say that this contract, this salary will be the base salary for the next 4 years, and no other increase shall be had unless the board votes on a bonus, to avoid getting in this situation again next year and the year after? I mean, we've got to, we can't just blank,
I mean,
say yes at the stroke of the pen without having some boundaries.
Do you want me to answer
Yes,
some of that?
sure.
I mean, so I'll go back a little bit. This number came about in looking at salary growth across the state over the last few years. And like, I mean, just as you pointed out, Port St. Lucie used to be 190, now it's 240, right? Things have changed. We have to, unfortunately, I mean, if we, ideally, in an idealistic world, school administrators would not make that much money in my idealistic world. Unfortunately, we have to operate in reality. And in order to manage the district and the people involved, we have to operate in reality. And the reality is it's a competitive market that's grown and changed. And I think if we operate in good faith with Dr. Moore and we increase his pay, we didn't have to increase his pay this year. You know, we could leave him at this lower rate another year. That's our decision. But when you operate in good faith and you reward progress and ultimately outcomes, when you reward outcomes appropriately, you get buy-in from your employees. And, you know, if we get Dr. Moore's buy-in, he gets more buy-in from his teachers and his staff, and there is a downward effect. I don't think the numbers that we're proposing here today are inappropriate. While it's a significant increase, it's more right-sizing to the market. At the end of the day, I mean, I guess I would ask you, would you rather have the superintendent in Port St. Lucie? Could we trade more for him? I think everyone would say unanimously no. So then you know, if you don't want that scenario, you have to pay someone appropriately to the market in reality. And you know, I agree idealistically, we would spend less tax dollars on school administrators. I full-heartedly agree with that. But unfortunately, that is just not the environment that we are operating in. You know, I think we have to do what's right and operate in good faith. And when we do that, I think what we do is we get a better outcome in the end, because I don't think Dr. Moore is going to come back and try to get a big raise when his next contract is up for negotiation. I think there'll be an appropriate change, but I don't think it's going to be some astronomical thing he's looking for, because we treated him fairly and appropriately.
Okay, so just like the teacher salary had to be right-sized because of the economy and because of the cost of living, we're in the same boat. And I'm going to tell you, having just come back from Fort Walton Beach with school district representatives from all over the state, there are several openings or potential openings for superintendents with very few quality candidates. And we have a quality person here. We do not want to lose him. It would cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars if we lost him. And it would be a huge loss, for upsetting the apple cart from the top. And when you see a school that has a principal change, there is a huge flux that happens in the school. People leave, people come, people go, and then you have this huge learning curve. We have to spend all this money to retrain everybody. Imagine having that at the top, where every school then, where we're on a great projection. Granted, I've already been through this once, and you know, we weren't on a great projection, and we were having financial problems. We don't anymore. We've gone from unstable to stable. We've gone from having schools that were almost failing to schools that are just pushing to the top. We've gone from 36th in the state to 9th in the state and rising. Thank you, Dr. Moore, for all of that. You deserve $250,000 a year, as far as I'm concerned. Dr. Prince, who I've worked with in St. Lucie County, is an outstanding educator. He is. I would love to work with him again sometime. He's a great guy.
He's good.
But he also is on a learning curve to be a superintendent. He's only been a superintendent for what, 2 years? 3 years? Okay. Same thing with Martin County. They got a brand-new superintendent. Charlotte County, just like us, brand-new superintendent. And they spent many, many dollars putting that person into the seat, just like we did when we got Dr. Moore. It cost us money to do this. And those districts right now, he's mentoring them. And so the mentees that he is mentoring are making the same, if not some cases with everything they've got with the perks and the benefits, more than he's making. To me, he deserves more than what you're proposing. I'd like to propose $250,000. And the reason why I say that is because I know what the market is. I know what's happening across the state. I know, I was in the elevator with somebody this week that said, when I said, please, I know you have a superintendent opening, please don't look our way, and she just kind of laughed and went, oh, we're looking. So I don't want Dr. Moore to know where they are. I want him to stay. You know, and when you have a good person, it costs you more money to replace them. It does. And it upsets everybody in the system. Our whole community would be affected by this change. I don't think he's going to come to us year after year after year and ask us for big, huge dollars. Right. I think this is our time to reward him and say, we realize what you're worth and we value you and we want to value you. And that's my thought on it.
Just
Dr. Jones?
A couple other things. Superintendents are like NFL players. You got 3 to 5 years and you go. Basically, if you look at the tenure of them.
Yep.
And whenever we look at, and I understand what people are saying about teachers, administrators, support staff, we've always got to look and compare, are we doing our absolute best in the pay that we give to teachers, administrators, and support staff? And we have to look at how they're being paid throughout the state and even the nation. And then with the superintendent pay, after Dr. Posca brought this up, and we had all had probably individual meetings with Dr. Moore regarding this, I looked around the state, and I think this is very, very reasonable. Dr. Moore, is it correct that in the last 5 years, you've just taken the 3 to 4% whatever administrators get?
For the last 2 years, yes.
2 years, okay. And if we look at, you know, at the end, let's say next year it comes up, well, I want $275,000. The board would just say no, or whoever's on the board. But see, that's the thing is, basically then after this year, we'd go back to next year of whatever the administrators get. Not this year, is that correct?
So through the chair, we have a contract, and I've honored that contract, and I've never gone to any one specific board member and say, hey, I need a raise or redo my salary. I'm simply looking for an opportunity to engage in a conversation to ensure my longevity in a community that both me and my wife love to be a part of. At the end of the day, I think what is for you is absolutely appropriate. So me and Jen are just looking for an opportunity to have longevity in a district that we love. That's it.
And that's correct. I brought it up. Dr. Moore didn't bring it up in our one-on-ones. Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, you reminded me of something I meant to ask earlier, didn't, but sort of the assumption, I believe the end of the current contract is next year?
Through the chair, the way the contract is designed, or maybe Molly can I mean, it's my contract, I can answer it. It renews a year out, so basically I'm under contract through 2027 based on what we did the way the contract is designed. So there's not an ending date to the contract.
It's a rolling contract?
Yes.
And right now rolling through 2027?
Yes.
So this would cover a period of 2 years before this contractually would be required to revisit.
There's no contractual requirement to renegotiate salary, and I think once you have correctly modified the salary so it is in fact competitive, the design of the contract eliminates the opportunity to engage in this kind of conversation. So it's
Right.
a one and done.
And I will reiterate, I hear what Ms. Rosario is saying in terms of the appropriate number of increase to be considered, and maybe a $14,000 difference. I think, given all things considered, that $14,000, in my mind, would be well spent. I look back on the previous school that I was in charge of and took the single school, and had a school there from $140,000 while I was there to, I think, about $220,000 when we left. That was 6 years ago. Of course, it was Manhattan. But it's the top person, and there we're competing against private schools that had $500 million to $1 billion in assets. So you're competing, and we were a very small school, very limited assets, but we're competing in that marketplace. So we have to recognize that. So I think on that basis, the difference between 225 and 239 is a small number. I would rather have the superintendent feel that he's properly compensated, and that we've done the right thing, regardless of $14,000. And I would hope and anticipate that he would find some of that increase to be funded by helping us close the $100,000 a year cost for the workshop, or the work group that we're working on. And that would be a major accomplishment if, when we hit it, it would more than justify the extra compensation.
Thank you.
I'll just throw in, because we did change the deferred compensation from 10 to 7.8. Part of why I kept that high is because of just where he is in his life. A retirement fund is very attractive. So as far as retention is concerned, leaving behind something that's tax sheltered, it's growing, it's there for his wife and kids, that is something that is very attractive to him, rather than just a part of his monthly paycheck. It creates a little bit more of a retention draw. But I think this is reasonable. I'm happy to support it.
That's a good point. The other thing I wanted to bring up, you're the one that has to put this into the budget and balance it. So, yeah, we could talk to Mr. Green all day long, but you're responsible for getting us a really good balanced budget in a good place. So I don't think you would ask us for anything that would put us in a negative
So
light.
we will continue to grow our fund balance from 11 to 17. I don't think any other district has done that, and we will continue to grow it.
And another reason why we should pay you. Thank you.
If we are, you talked about the terms of the agreement. If we are looking to enter into this contract agreement now, right now, the term of agreement says that this current contract that he has is continuous until June 30th of 2024, unless terminated sooner. And then there is another part of his contract that has this rolling agreement, that if nothing is done, then it rolls over until the next year. If nothing is done, it keeps rolling over. So essentially, it's kind of like this ongoing contract. But if we are negotiating a new salary, then it would only be right to negotiate that salary with new terms, with a new year term for the next 3 years, for the next 4 years, or whatever. So that's something that I'm throwing out there. The other thing that I'm going to say is, yes, indeed, you did, Dr. Moore, have this conversation with me about your salary. I didn't bring it up, you did, and you did say that you would like to negotiate the contract, that you would like us to consider, and I asked you, what are you asking for? And you said 225. That was in our one-on-one. So you sitting here and saying that that never happened, that did.
Question for,
Yes, Dr. Jones.
in reference to what Mr. Rosario said about the contract, we were just looking at those amendments that you sent to us, right? That's all we were looking to change at this time.
To the chair, so we have a contract, and it's an agreement, so we
Right.
would agree to make those
Right.
amendments. So
Right.
those would be the only things in which I would agree to.
So I have another question to add. Dr. Moore, typically we talk to or look at our administrator's salary and increasing them pretty soon, right? Would you take that same percentage on top of this? Sorry, say that again?
No.
Okay, thank you.
He confirmed that earlier, that
Yes,
this would be.
I know. I wanted to make sure it was in the record and everybody understood that.
But if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist.
It's in record, it's on tape, we have it.
And it is built into the language that Molly created.
All right, thank you. Okay, so that was our discussion item.
Thank you.
Sounds like you have consensus.
So I do
to move
have,
forward.
thank you, an update on the storm. So at 5:15, we'll be meeting at the Emergency Command Center for a meeting regarding the opening of shelters. So right now Oslo was initially scheduled to be a opening shelter. They're not going to open that one tentatively. I think it's take a little tick to the north. So we'll be announcing shelter openings hopefully by 6 p.m. this evening. And that's it. That concludes the meeting.
Okay, with that, I'm
Wait,
going,
I have some discussion. Actually, it looks like,
Oh, no, I just wanted to say thank you and be safe, everybody.
there's no added discussion item on here.
yeah, I wanted to bring up I'll bring up a question to the board.
Okay.
We did direct, at our last meeting, we directed the superintendent to publish the public notice for the actions that we did on 2130, and I guess indirectly it would include this new 2750 policy. And in speaking with him, he referred to me the idea that we need to specify a special meeting date. So I'm going to call for a special meeting to accommodate that so that we can act on this outside the 28-day limitation. And so I guess I could call for that at this time if that's possible.
Okay, so you're asking for a special meeting date to act on what?
Act on 2130. And I don't know, does this 2750 come up at the next business meeting?
So you're asking for us to move the work group from the discussion of the workshop to immediately to vote on a special board meeting?
Yeah, I'm asking for a special board meeting so that we can address the repeal of 2130,
Okay.
which we unanimously agreed to 2 weeks ago.
Okay,
But it needs to be published. Dr. Moore explained that in order to do that, we need to set a date, and I'm proposing a date of November 12th, because this next week causes all kinds of problems with the storm. But I'm proposing that meeting on November 12th so that we can handle that.
okay, hold on one second, hold on. So there are a couple of concerns when you have a special meeting. They're not treated the same as our regular business meeting. Business meeting, we could just put it up on the website immediately and announce it. This actually came up in my meeting I had this week because an attorney was there and they were talking about, there was some discussion about the law changing last year where we don't have to go to the newspaper every time we want to advertise, right? You still have to for special meetings. You still have to.
Yeah, and this is an open meeting, we have to. That's why the 28-day limitation
Right.
with the storm puts it on November 12th rather than November 4th.
I understand that. However, you have to advertise it, and once it's advertised in the paper, then the clock ticks. It's not from this point that the clock ticks. The clock starts ticking after it reaches the paper, and then the community knows about it.
Right, that's why, although that's our policy. The state law does not require it, but our policy does require that, and that's why.
State law requires us to put it in the newspaper for a special meeting. Okay. I'm going to tell you that an attorney just went over
But
that.
notwithstanding, so Dr. Moore and I discussed that, and that's where we came to an understanding that November 12th would meet those requirements and allow him the time to get that published.
Okay, let me ask you, Dr. Moore, if you called the newspaper today,
So
how many days does it take? Can we get that done in time? That's my question.
Through the chair, immediately following the last board meeting, the board secretary schedules for the ad to go out. The ad was scheduled to go out the October 14th, which gives us as much time as getting as close to the actual November board meeting, so we're not having it weeks beyond the actual meeting itself in which the board votes. We did confirm this morning after listening to Mr. McDonald's request that we can have the article published Friday, this coming up Friday. Barring any storm issues, but it looks like on the trend right now, unless it changes, that should probably be a likelihood. If that was the case, then on November 11th, the 28 days would expire, and we would be able to, if at the will of the board, hold a meeting, which would be a meeting that we could in fact schedule. We have plenty of notice, we have a whole board meeting in between, and the intent of that meeting, Mr. McDonald is requesting that they repeal that policy during that specific meeting.
So why then can't this just go on our November meeting? Why do we have to have a special meeting?
Well, I'd like to, since I was the one who initiated this, I think it's appropriate for me not to dump this on a future board, and I would like to see it through the end, and I would hope to have had it done a few weeks earlier, but our delays have taken us to that date.
And you're asking for the 12th, which is a Tuesday?
The 12th, yes, Monday is a holiday,
I
Veterans Day.
can't do a Tuesday. I'm sorry. I teach on Tuesdays all the way up until late at night. So I can't do Tuesday, so I'm out for the 12th. I can do the 11th.
I mean,
don't know if
That's a
that's
day
in-
off. It's the 11th. You can do
It's
the
a
12th.
Veterans Day.
Oh,
The
that's Veterans
13th.
Day.
13, I'm more than happy to flex to the
13th, I
13th.
teach until 5:30, 6 o'clock.
We don't need everybody.
Okay,
I know, I'm just saying, this is the time for us to, if you're
Yeah.
asking for a calendar, we all get to say if we're
Yeah.
available or not. I'm not available on the 12th.
We want to accommodate
Okay.
whoever we can.
Ms. Rosario?
okay. 28 days from our last business meeting is October 21st, not November.
Right, but what,
So you have plenty of time after October 21st.
but the issue which has been raised is it does have to be published with the state, and with our policies, it has to be,
Yeah, but you would
Published
still,
in the newspaper.
even on the 28th, if you look at the 28th, October 28th, you can do it on, it's a Monday. Most people are, schedule Mondays to be work days. November 4th,
well, November 4th was one I was looking at initially, just a matter, well, and actually, it came to mind that, well, the normal idea of publishing in the newspaper is the newspaper, and now we do news digitally, so
Yeah, but
they can,
So
you
through
don't
the
worry about
chair,
that.
I
They'll have
don't,
plenty of time to have the 3 days' notice. But I'm just suggesting Mondays because we typically meet on Mondays anyway, on the alternate days that we do not have.
right.
And I can't imagine it's going to be a meeting that would be 2 or 3 hours. I
No.
mean, it's just going to be one, I'm hearing you say there's just one item that you want to call a special meeting to. So even if it were on a day that, we were already meeting, that would be totally fine.
Could we do November
Mr.
4th?
No.
Mr. McDonald, I'm okay with whatever you decide. I will make it work.
so through the chair, the earliest day that we could have it would be November 11th. Because
why?
that is the 28th, November 11th.
Why?
Because the 28 days notice could not go out until this Friday. And it's not a delay, it's a scheduled time in which we're actually moving up the posting to have it done by November 11th.
Why did you wait this long? We had our meeting on the 23rd.
We just talked about it today in the workshop.
No,
No,
not that
we
policy.
voted.
Not this policy
We
right here?
voted on
Which
this.
policy are you talking about? I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about the
The
one.
repeal of
2130.
2130, we
The
could
repeal of
address this one at the same
2130 was
time,
done, it should have been, that was our vote. Why is it being published or made for public hearing this Friday, past Friday?
Because that is the practice, and you would want to have it posted the 28 days as close to the actual voting of the meeting in which you're going to conduct that specific vote. So the practice has always been, since I been here, and the 7 years before I was here, that you post your advertisements so the window closes as close to the date in which the board is going to take action. That is the process that we have always followed. So if the goal or the desire is to get it done, we can post it on Friday, which is ahead of this time in which we've scheduled to get it done, as we've always done, in order to meet the request that Mr. McDonald is making, that we can, in fact, on the 11th, 12th, 13th, or any day thereafter, hold the meeting to repeal the policy.
And why can't you post it tomorrow?
That's the logistics of the newspaper. So the newspaper gave us the okay to say pending, their building's blown away, it can be posted on Friday. So then we did the count.
So 28 days from October 11th.
Yes. And any day, I will make me and staff available.
Question, Ms. Berenborg?
Yes.
whatever date is decided, and Mr. McDonald said he wanted to get it finished. This is a change in policy 2130, so it has to be a supermajority vote to change it. I mean, Ms. Shattuck, I've asked this several times.
So in your policy 2130, it says that it has to have a supermajority to amend it, but you're not looking to amend it now, you're looking to repeal it.
And we did have a unanimous agreement on that at our last meeting.
Unanimous agreement to what?
It was proposed that we would repeal 2130.
I did not agree to that.
I'm
It's
sorry?
not unanimous. You might have had a majority.
Maybe it was majority.
Okay.
I thought, in my memory, it was unanimous, but perhaps I didn't check
I
that.
said I could not support that. I was also on Zoom, so I might not have heard,
Okay,
because I was in Washington DC.
so, I'm sorry, so let's go back to the calendar. So November, what did you say, Dr. Moore, about November 4th?
November 4th, we would not be within the required 28 days of notice.
So the 28 days would be when? From when? What is that date? November 7th?
November,
Friday the 11th.
No. From,
October 11th is when it would be posted.
from October 11th until 28 days. Is that November 8th?
November 11th.
which is Veterans Day, so we could meet on the
November
12th or the
11th.
the 13th. Or the 14th. We'll figure it out.
So I'm available on the 13th. I'm available on the 12th, the 13th, or the
Dr. Bosco?
14th, whatever is.
I'm potentially available on those 12 through 14. I would propose that we task Ms. Moray maybe with starting an email between us. That's how that we've done these special meetings in the past. And as long as we have a quorum and we agree to do it, we can do it.
I have another comment, because if it's on Tuesday, I can't do it.
No, it's, our
but-
protocols have
Excuse me,
the attorney.
but in order to have a meeting, though, even if it's a special meeting, do you have to have either the chair or the vice chair there? Because I've seen that in statute, too. I'm just curious.
So a special meeting would be one where, yes, you would need a chairperson to preside over the meeting. If you as the chair couldn't be present, the vice chair would step in to preside over the meeting. You still have your quorum requirements where you need a quorum to be physically present. So it's the same types of requirements that you have for like a regular board meeting.
No.
So you would have to have one of the two of us here?
No.
Yes. Didn't you just say
No,
that?
then
No.
someone else would chair the meeting.
No, the law says that it's a quorum.
Can I ask the attorney, could you clarify that for us?
Yes, it would be the same as with a regular meeting. Your special meetings have the same procedures, basically, as your regular board meetings. The reason that they're special is because they're,
They're just called.
called for a special purpose.
But in other words, you have to have either the chair or the vice chair there to run the meeting, is that correct?
You have to have somebody there to chair the meeting.
The vice chair or the chair?
No, she said something.
I'm asking you.
So,
Is it written vice chair or chair? Because I've seen it written that way before. I'm just asking in case she can't be there as well.
so I can look at your policies really quickly. I've never had that come up. If it's not the chair, then the vice chair presides for the chair. I don't know if in your policy, there's a procedure where a different board member would chair if the chair
That's what I'm
and the
asking,
vice
because the
chair
last
were
time
not
we had a
there.
special meeting, that came up.
I can look into that for
Okay.
you.
I'm just saying you need to work
Yeah,
it out,
it's-
so
it's
one
a-
of us can be there.
It's a good question. I'm not positive. I'm sort of remembering back in Robert's rules, it allows of the members present for someone to elect a temporary chair, but I'm not sure if that applies with our policies.
So through the chair, just as you continue the conversation, ideally, we identify a date today, because that's what is going to be noticed in the paper.
Right.
So we lose the time frame that I've presented if we don't identify a date today. I'm hearing 11/13 may work based on,
Is that a Wednesday?
it is a Wednesday,
Can it be 6 o'clock
6 o'clock, we're ready.
or later?
6,
Only
Late
because
is
I
always
know I
good.
work on Wednesday afternoons too, but I can't remember what time I'm
That's
finished.
fine.
Dr. Posca?
That
Later day
works.
works for you?
Yeah, Wednesday evening we can plan for.
Okay.
And Dr. Jones, in case I'm not there, are you available on that date? Okay, so you've got one of the two.
So we have a date.
All right.
Dorian, go to work?
Wednesday, the
I'm not running.
13th, that is. Wednesday, the 13th, we've settled in? Okay.
The 13th.
So we're only asking to repeal one policy, not put another policy in place at the same time?
That was my objective. However, the question goes out, I think Dr. Jones mentioned earlier the thought that she might feel comfortable if both of them are handled at the same time, and
We can't because you're yet to approve to send it to public hearing. So that will have to be later.
that's what I was thinking as well.
Yeah, I have a hard time with that too. I don't see repealing a policy and not putting another policy in place at the same time. I think that just sends a terrible message out there. We need to do them both at the same time. The hurrying up of all of this, if you'd like to, maybe we have you come to that meeting that we do this and discuss it, and then you can come and talk at the podium.
I don't think it should be an issue doing them both at the same time because the policy is not currently enacted. So it's a policy that's not active.
A new policy in that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is what we're repealing is not even active, so why would it, what's your concern?
I just think it sends a bad message, that's all. You know, that message we got before when we said we wanted to repeal it immediately?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
it's
just
not an
saying.
active policy, I mean.
I just think the perception is not good. That's all. I just don't want to start it all over again. I
Yeah.
think, let's calm it down, just to get it hurried through, just to upset it and turn it up again in the community. I don't like that. I just personally don't feel like it's important to rush this just to upset people. You know, let's do it right.
Well,
I'm okay with changing it, I am. And invite you back and, you know, do it, you won't be able to vote on it, but at least you could be there and come to the meeting, to the podium and speak.
You'll get used to me.
Okay. I just don't, I feel really strongly about repealing this without putting something else in its place. I do.
Nonetheless, I still ask for the special meeting.
Go ahead, Ms. Rosario.
Sunshine law requires that it is a quorum of the board. It does not say that the named or current chair or vice chair have to be present. It is a quorum of the board. There is no discussion in sunshine law or description of who then presides as chair in lieu of the current chair or the vice chair not being present at a special meeting. So any three of us can be present, which would be a quorum of the board, and then we can probably say, you know, at that point, I guess, assign one of us to be chair, or maybe even the person who is calling the special meeting be the chair in that case. But the law does not define this chair or that vice chair, that they have to be present. So that, just want that to be clear. Our policy also doesn't indicate that. And to Dr. Posca's point before, our protocols, we don't have it in the policy, we have it in our protocols that state that it is Ms. Shattuck's responsibility, not Ms. Morey's responsibility, to contact every board member and get a date that would be appropriate for each one of us. We had an issue with the previous executive administrator assistant who was in that position, and it was very, very awkward. And it turned out to be a big deal. And so as a result, we changed it to make sure that our attorney would handle those phone calls to set a date. But if we're okay with a date, I'm okay with it. It doesn't have to be Ms. Shattuck, we can talk about it now. I'm totally okay with whatever you decide. This was your item, I understand the concern. I don't have an issue with moving forward with it, you know, or we're certainly not upsetting the apple cart here because it's not an item that is currently, as Dr. Posca mentioned, currently enacted. It's not active, so it doesn't really matter.
Ms. Berenborg?
Yes.
Just I think we have to be really careful on our messaging here. I wish we could do one and then put the other one immediately. And for those of you who were here when it was written a couple of years ago, it's just a good faith message to our NAACP regarding the DSEG order and the many years that we have gone through with that. I just think we have to be very, very careful about the messaging. You know, when you looked at it and you were in the judge's room when we talked about this policy and how we are putting it in there, and we would make sure right when we got unitary status, we would continue. And that, she said, you're really unique with that. You're going to continue the work and not put it on the shelf. So whether I'm here, any of you are here, Dr. Moore's here, I think we have to be really, really careful about the messaging, because in the first one, it did take out the NAACP. Dr. Posca said in the first one, put that back in, make it go in perpetuity. Loved those, loved those. But now we have Dr. Moore's, which I think is good. I'm going to be looking very carefully at the green factors and the student achievement. But the messaging is very, very important here, because collaboration is needed as we close that achievement gap.
Anyone else? Yes, our attorney would like to speak.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I just wanted to answer your question from before about who presides if the chair and vice chair can't be there. I did find it in your bylaw 0163. If the chairperson is not available, the vice chair acts instead, and if neither is available, any member shall be designated by a plurality of those present to preside.
Okay, I knew it was written somewhere, I just didn't know
Yeah.
how it was written. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So just to bring a level, 11:13 at 6 PM is when we will schedule this hearing. That concludes our business for the day.
Okay, thank you. It's 3:29. We are adjourned.
Be safe, be safe, be safe.